Вітаю на шовковій полі, я полкового знамена. Дивлюсь на нього я востаннє у нез'ясованій журбі. Всю кров мою зі скидання воно вібрало у собі. Всю кров мою зі скидання воно вібрало у собі. Усе, що разом пережито, в обходах вистраждано все. Я знаю, інші гордовито прапороносець понесе. Дивлюсь на нього я востаннє у нез'ясованій журбі. Всю кров мою зі скидання воно вібрало у собі. Всю кров мою зі скидання воно вібрало у собі.
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великой страны.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Ті, хто воде всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на ордів образу з російських бандитів. Робить примар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там пивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар. Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Ще не вмерла України ні слава, ні воля. Ще нам, браття українці, усміхнеться доля. Згинуть наші вороженьки, як роса на сонці. Запануємо ми, браття, у своїй сторонці. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу. нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького роду.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer. I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, everybody. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 256 of the news, and a big old yeah!
And of course, welcome back, everyone, to the past 48 hours of news in the war in Ukraine. Some of y'all may have noticed last night, and some of y'all may have also gotten the messages, both that were put out on the community tab on this channel and on the Discord, that there was no stream last night, and those were correct. And in case if y'all did not get those messages, and you were wondering where the stream was, just before we move on, just in case if anyone was wondering, so that way everyone's not asking about this the whole time, I was so exhausted yesterday that I could not run a stream. I fell, for the first time ever in 254 days, well, 256 days now, flat on my face, and it completely run out of energy, and so the stream just couldn't run. For the first time ever, I think, yeah, that would be the first time ever, I actually burned out for a second. Now I've gotten pretty well rested, still trying to make sure that I got enough energy, but we are back at it again, and we're going to be covering the war in Ukraine for the rest of the war. Of course, I can't guarantee if I won't fall flat on my face energy-wise again and just run completely out of steam, and if that ever happens, probably be way down the road, but of course, I hope everyone understands, because it is kind of tiring sometimes doing everything in the background. Like, we've been trying to move from place to place, we've been doing college full-time, doing this for 50, 60 hours a week, so it does get a little bit tiresome. So sorry about that, everyone. But one thing that did happen over the past 48 hours, and I think a lot of y'all may have been around about a couple of weeks ago when I said this, is that it's finally happened. The Russians are pulling that last-ditch effort of an offensive that we said on this channel would be happening. A lot of people have always asked for about the past month, will the Russians ever be able to recover? And I said, for the large part, no. But they will do something that looks like they've recovered, and that will be a last-ditch offensive. And in the area of Bakhmut, we have seen that this offensive has begun to occur, and this area here, that's been a large, I guess you could say, finger that the Ukrainians have had extending eastward into the Russian lines, has now been closed by the Russians, which I'll edit here on screen so y'all can visibly see the difference. And the Russians have now taken Zaitsevo, and they're now right on the outskirts of Bakhmut again. This has come after days of Russian offensives in this area, and so far, this small amount of ground, about equivalent to a mile and a half worth, has cost the Russians almost 4,000 dead and nearly 8 to 12,000 wounded. We don't have an exact figure on the wounded, but the dead we do have a figure for. It's close to 4,000 soldiers. Never before has the Russian armed forces taken this high amount of casualties covering such a small area of ground, and that is what keys us in that this is the last-ditch attempt that we were talking about around a month ago on this channel. The Russians no longer have the ability, the supplies, nor the trained manpower, although it's highly questionable whether they had that in the first place, to conduct another offensive. Yet they are trying again to see if this one offensive in capturing Bakhmut can turn this war around into their favor. And it looks like, by and large, it isn't. So first, we're going to start off with yesterday's news, which is in the olive-ish color, and then we'll be going to today's news on day 256, that is in the yellowish color. Starting up near Yakovlivka, we saw that a Russian tank ran headlong into a mine. When you see the Russian tanks moving down the tree line, see it's a largely desolate one, and then the first one in the convoy, well, I guess you could say the column more like, fires into the tree line, into what appears to be an abandoned trench line, and then runs over an anti-tank mine to complete the whole entire trifecta of stupidity here. We can now see one of the tank cameras of the action. It looks like the tank just ran over the mine and is now veering off the road to the right, and has now come to a stop as it's most likely been demobilized. With that, that's the end of the video, but you can see that the Russians are pushing forward. This video does show Russian tanks appearing to push forward onto an abandoned Ukrainian trench line, but they are still taking losses in a way. This tank will most likely be abandoned where it is, considering it's on the front line, and recovering it would be too costly or too difficult. And so for that reason, we can see that while it looks like they are gaining a little bit of ground in that clip, they are still losing a decent amount of material losses. $3.5 million in 1 second, to be exact. With that, we're now going to be moving on into the next clip from yesterday, where we can see that the Fighting 93rd, the famous Fighting 93rd, is still destroying tanks in the Bakhmut area. We can see here one Russian APC driving down the road. And we haven't seen the Ukrainian tank yet from the Fighting 93rd, but we will soon. Actually, hang on. Let's go back and watch that one more time. I don't know if there was a tank there, because you see, I believe, if I'm correct, it says destroyed by a Ukrainian tank in the caption, and that's what we're going off of here. But I don't see the tank. It could be off-frame. That is a good explanation as to why we're not seeing it. But at the same time, that might be a DM-22 or DM, I believe, 33 anti-tank mine on the side of the road, or that may have been artillery that dropped down onto that vehicle. We're not exactly sure, but still, credit does go to the 93rd Brigade, who did conduct that little precise hit on that APC, knocking it out and, of course, making it incredibly difficult for the Russians to gain ground. And while the Ukrainians have been making it incredibly difficult for the Russians to gain ground, the human waves that the Russians have pretty much been throwing into this area are still overrunning Ukrainian lines a little bit and causing them to fall back further into Bakhmut city. Here we can see, again, some more footage from the 93rd showing some kind of a battle occurring inside of a building in the area of Bakhmut. And so here's the video of this soldier from the Fighting 93rd, of course, once again. Always got to say that's the Fighting 93rd because they have really proven themselves over the course of this war, and here's the footage of them in action. We can see them inside of this house talking to each other. We now see them getting back on the wall for a second. We can now see the Ukrainian soldier walking back through the building, really more like running. He's now going up to the next floor. We can see that the building is heavily damaged. Debris is all over the staircase, and he's now made it up to the next floor of the building, where we can see a similar lobby, but this one appears to have taken a little bit more damage. We now see the soldier holding a magazine to an AK, and it looks like he's trying to reload it real quick. Hand loading is quite a chore. If you've never hand loaded a magazine, it is quite tedious. It's not difficult, but it is tedious. And we can see that this soldier is having to go through this incredibly tedious process in the middle of a battle. Not exactly the funnest time to do it, not exactly the best thing to do at all, but still, one has to do it. It seems that he is now reloading his AK, getting it ready to go, I assume. And now, actually, he's still hand-loading a magazine. Now he's reloading the AK. And with that, that's the end of the video, but that does give you a little bit of a look into what life is like in the city of Bakhmut for the Fighting 93rd, which, while it extends from what we know all the way up towards the direction of Soledar, they're also in the area of Bakhmut city as well. Of course, not exact locations, and of course, not every single part of the front line is filled with soldiers, But still, it gives you a good idea of who is defending Bakhmut, and with the 93rd Brigade there in the city itself, I have pretty good reason to assume that Bakhmut is in fairly good hands, and the city most likely will hold. Although, once again, gotta say, the Russians are throwing everything they have towards the city of Bakhmut. And so for that reason, we may see that while they may take Bakhmut, and I'm not throwing that out of the equation, that could be entirely possible, the Russians are going to take so many casualties in the attempt that it may as well be a Pyrrhic victory. And if y'all don't know what a Pyrrhic victory is, that means that the victory that you achieved was really negated by the amount of losses you took. So it's like taking a small farmhouse, but losing 5,000 guys in the meantime. Moving on further down into Bakhmut city, we can also see Ukrainians in the streets of Bakhmut, and this shows you how close the Russians have actually gotten. See them looking around the street. Destroyed Russian armored personnel carriers, it seems, are all around the road. And they are Russian, so that's a good sign. And now we're going to have to mute it because we can hear some copyrighted music there. But we can see them walking back through the rubble. We can see some explosions in the distance, most likely artillery. We can see some shrapnel through a fence. More destroyed vehicles. The Ukrainian blue and yellow banner flying over the field. Some burning houses, unfortunately. You see them showing, it's almost like it was in a loop for a music video, but with that, that's the end of the clip, and it's nice to see that the Ukrainian forces are inflicting massive losses on the Russians once they finally made it to, I guess you could say, the gates of Bakhmut, and it looks like they're not really making it any farther than there. Moving on to our last clip from the area around Bakhmut, we can also see that Russian tanks assaulted a tree line. This is also the footage from the other day, day 255, but this footage shows, I believe if I'm correct, the entirety, the full-length clip of what the Russian tanks were doing, and I am correct. So with that, here's a video. This is much longer footage, but from day 255, and it was put out on day 256. When you see the Russian tanks rolling forward through the fields, you can see the muddy slush that they pretty much turned into. And we can now see them moving into the area where we last saw them on the last clip, where the first one ran into an anti-tank mine. We can now see them moving down the tree line, and of course, it's about to happen again. It's going to run into the anti-tank mine. We can see them firing into the tree line, and one thing I'd like to know, and I think this is very important to point out, is that this video is supposed to make it look like the Russians, because this was filmed by the Russians and of course published by them, this is supposed to make the Russian forces look incredibly strong and incredibly brave. But there is something foolhardy about this little endeavor, and that's taking a $3.5 million tank and putting it within yards of infantry, so hypothetically, we never see them in the video, but putting them hypothetically within yards of infantry that could have anti-tank weapons. And so not really smart when you think about it in the by and large actual aspect of what's going on here, but the Russians want to look cool, and so through the effort of trying to look cool, they will pull idiotic moves. Now see them looking around a little bit. And what's interesting to me is, once again, this video's title, and I want to point this out to y'all, 2 Russian tanks assaulting a trench in a tree line, point-blank range. Well, it's great to shoot at the ground and all, but where's the infantry? Because these tanks are sitting here doing nothing. They fire a couple of rounds, yes, but in the meantime, you don't see Ukrainian soldiers because, you know, of course, to prove that you're firing at Ukrainian soldiers, they've got to be there at some point. We never see Ukrainian soldiers in this entire video. They're practically just shooting into an abandoned tree line for all we know. We see them fire again. The first tank is just sitting there now. We can see it rolling forward again. This time we'll see it run over the anti-tank mine right there, which detracts it, making it turn right and towards the tree line. It will then stop. The tank behind it will also stop here in a second. We can now see this one firing forward into the tree line. We can now see this one scanning the tree line for Ukrainian soldiers, but we don't see them anywhere. When you see the tank hit the AT mine again, quite a little hit. When you see them still firing into the tree line, this one's also got some spare parts dangling off the side, which isn't exactly good. When you see some kind of explosion beside the tank, we don't know where it came from. See them firing into the tree line again. We can see something go skirting across the ground in front of them. It appears to have come from the bottom side of the screen going forwards. The front tank, still demobilized, is sitting there on the road, not moving. Here in this clip, finally, we see one Ukrainian infantryman right there. It appears that he's moving around, but the tanks aren't firing at him. They're firing at a part of the trench where we've never seen a Ukrainian soldier yet. These appear to be Russian soldiers now that are moving forward into the trench. And now they're going to begin the process of clearing a trench that has a grand total of one guy in it. This, of course, cost them a $3.5 million tank that will then be abandoned on the front lines later, and about an entire infantry platoon's worth of effort. All in all, pretty good job. Gotta say, the Russians are good at allocating resources into attacking one guy, and it looks like that one guy, from what we can tell, may have been able to make it out of there, although I'm not entirely sure. We can see Russian soldiers, though, moving up the trench. Well, you see what appears to be more Russian soldiers crowding the trench. And now the Russians are just kind of wandering around doing their little thing. And with that, that's the end of the video. But once again, a pretty interesting look at how much effort the Russians are putting into the offensive at Bakhmut. And you can also get a pretty good idea why the Russians are taking so many casualties. Now, there was only one guy that we saw in that footage. One guy that we could confirm was there. There may have been others, but we never saw them on film. And so it took 2 tanks, each of them are $3.5 million, so $7 million worth of tanks and around 15 Russian infantry, from what we could tell, to assault a trench with one guy in it. And that's how much effort it takes to overrun the Ukrainian army. Like, how many Russians, Matthew, does it take to overrun one Ukrainian soldier?
Probably the whole army.
A quarter of a battalion tactical group. And so that's the end of the video, but once again, the Russians have made a little bit of ground, and to summarize what's going on in this area once again, and in better, and I guess you could say a wider, big picture detail, what we're seeing here is the Russians' last-ditch attempt at an offensive. If I had to compare this to anything, I would compare this to the Battle of the Bulge. The reason being, and you could of course compare this to a couple of other offensives in a couple of other wars, but I feel like this is the one that'll be known by the most. It was also known as the Ardennes offensive, but everyone pretty much calls it the Battle of the Bulge. Speaking about this in a little bit of depth, so that way you can see the comparison, the Germans at this point in the war were beat, by and large. The Eastern Front was a grinding mess with loads of Germans getting killed at this point, and really no kind of control or semblance of a defensive. And the Western Allies, of course, the United States, the British, the Canadians, the Belgians, the Free French, and so on, were pushing through France and on into Germany. And so at this point, they had made it into about Belgium and a little bit into the Netherlands. The Germans decided, although they knew, much like the Russians do at this point, that they had neither the resources nor the trained manpower to go through an offensive, the Germans decided that the best thing to do was to try and punch through the Allied lines near Bastogne, race to the sea, and try and cut the Allied lines into 2, hopefully turning the war back around into their favor, so maybe they could get some kind of a negotiated peace with the Western Allies, and so they could focus their efforts entirely towards the Soviet Union. They went through the offensive. They did make a decent amount of ground initially during the Battle of the Bulge. They did break through the American lines and overrun a decent amount of American units, but by and large, at the end of this offensive, they would fail. There was absolutely nothing that the Germans could do, although it appeared at the beginning they were making ground, much like the Russians are right now. There was nothing they could do to turn the inevitable tide of the war at that point, and so after about, I believe it was less than a month of fighting, the entire offensive crumbled, and the Allies just pushed them back to where their lines originally were. And due to all of the wasted resources and manpowers in that offensive, the German lines from then on would collapse a little bit quicker in that area, and they would get pushed back even farther. I believe, if I'm correct, that would also be kind of like the gateway towards Aachen, which is known as, I guess you could say, the Allied, the Western version of Stalingrad, but that's a story for another time, maybe for a video. But with that, that is the situation we're looking at in Bakhmut, and I may be wrong. Always keep that in mind every time I say this kind of stuff and give historical precedent. It's not always correct. Sometimes it can be wrong, but that's what we're kind of looking at right now, and we're about at that stage in the war. The Russians just don't have the ability, the effort, nor the manpower to be able to undertake offensives like these, and so it's nothing more than a silly waste of resources to really gain small hand advantages right now, to lose them practically weeks or months into the future. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the Bakhmut area and on into Russia and into Moscow, where we've actually gotten an interesting result from Radio Free Europe. Of course, an incredible reporting agency that is, I guess you could say, what's it called, Matthew? Free or public source?
I think open source. Maybe.
Open source. It's an open source reporting agency, and they've been able to get people inside of Russia, and they have polled the Russian public, and believe it or not, 68%, according to their poll, of the Russian public support this war. And real quick, I'm going to show you all a little snippet of what they found and what they've seen inside of Russia with the public. And so, here's the video.
Достаточно этого всего, наверное. Надо 24/7 их бомбить. Потому что люди уже потеряли страх окончательно. Ну и голову, и рассудок, наверное, все в этом ключе. Путь, который они выбрали, он действительно неправильный и ведет, не ведет ни к чему хорошему.
Я считаю, все правильно наше государство делает. Я живу в России, поэтому, естественно, я только за Россию и больше никаких других комментариев дать даже не могу.
Ну, справедливости. То, что как бы нужно свое отвоевать. Мы победим. Вот. То, что Россия, мы всегда были сильны.
And with that, that's the end of the video, but you can see right here, based off of a couple of people, and I'm assuming that this poll that Radio Free Europe has conducted consisted of hundreds or thousands of people. Based off of the people that they've surveyed, 68% of the Russian public is in favor of this war. Of course, that doesn't mention that almost 1 in every 3 Russians do not support the war, but still, it's quite alarming to see that 68%, according to the poll, support the war. It's kind of a little bit interesting to see and kind of gives you an idea of what we may be looking at inside of Russia. If 68% of the public supports the war, the government might be able to survive if this poll is correct. They might have enough support in the public to maybe even go and do more drastic measures. We're not entirely sure, but still it is a little bit of an odd look and an odd sight, considering that we have been seeing some very ghastly sights from the Russian partially mobilized conscripts and the weapons and the equipment they're being issued, and that information is making it back to the Russians, and somehow they are as supportive for the war now as they were at the start. It doesn't make a lot of sense, and I guess that speaks bounds about Russia as a country. But with that, we're now going to be moving towards the area of Tula, where we saw that some Russian conscripts are not exactly happy with the brand new helmets they've been issued. And of course, keyword brand new. But let's take a look at their helmets.
Охуенные каски пришли со Ставропольского края. Это просто.
You see them taking a look around the helmet?
Вот она разрывается. Посмотрите. Вот это
taking out some of the inside padding. And it looks like, Matthew, it may be a little broken. I think they call this an eggshell helmet.
Probably so.
A chick was birthed from this helmet. It came out of its egg a little bit earlier.
Ножиком. Вот просто. Вот она снимается. Там про пулю даже слова нет. Вот, элементарно. Спасибо администрации Ставропольского края. Огромное. И вот зам главы администрации, да, который там орал, что, блин, мы все в бой пойдем. Одень эту каску, пойди в бой. Лично первый. А мы потом за тобой.
And with that, that's the end of the video. But right there at the end, it looks like this man was whipping out a small, what is that, a nail? A lighter? Like, what is that thing?
Not really sure. It looks like a cigarette or something, but I don't think it is.
It honestly looks like a miniature Sharpie. whatever it is, it looks like he's about to tap it on the side of the helmet, and I guess he's about to help the chick get out of its helmet? I don't know, but still, a very interesting video, and once again showing y'all the quality of Russian equipment. Of course, this stuff is from Wish.com, and you just can't expect quality out of something from Wish.com. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from this little clip of news showing the Russians having some problems with their helmets, and I think that they will probably not get sorted out as this war goes on. Some Russian commander out there is getting a good laugh watching this as he's sitting back on his own private yacht after he's siphoned the funds out of the Russian army, so they'll just have to live with it. But with that, we're now going to be moving out of Russia and from our two little bits of news that we've gotten there today, and we're now going to be moving into Lithuania real quick to make sure we cover the only bit of international news we have today. In case of y'all don't know, there is a small part of Russia in between Lithuania and Poland that was taken from the Germans at the end of World War II. This area used to be known as East Prussia, and now, under Russian control, it's called Kaliningrad. This city was also called Königsberg at one time, and it's now called Kaliningrad. This area is, of course, part of the Russian Federation, and it has been that way since the very end of World War II. But one problem is that there is no land route connection in between Kaliningrad and the rest of Russia. And so what the Russians have to do to transport military equipment there is either transport it by sea from a place like St. Petersburg down to Kaliningrad itself, or by land or railroad through Lithuania or Poland and into Kaliningrad. Of course, there's a lot of diplomatic problems there that surround this, and we can see one of those surface recently as the Lithuanians stepped up and stopped a VDV rail car and what appears to be an entire VDV supply train from moving from Kaliningrad and on into Belarus, and we can see a picture of one of these rail cars right here. It's very odd to look at because they don't really do a good job of camouflaging their, I guess you could say, rail cars. It literally says down here at the bottom, VDV, and then it says something like, "We lead the way," I believe, or something like that. Anyways, what else gives this away is that they've literally spray painted the VDV's emblem right here onto the rail car. And so if you're trying to move military equipment from Kaliningrad and into Belarus and then on into Russia, it's going to be quite difficult these days because they give it away quite easily. But of course, the Lithuanians, seeing this as obviously a military supply train, stopped it dead in its tracks and refused it from leaving Lithuania. And so practically, the Lithuanians at this point have seized Russian military equipment for themselves and are refusing to release it under any conditions at the moment. It's so quite an interesting little bit of news, and while this seems like a small thing, a rail car isn't that large in terms of, I guess you could say it's, well, that's a bit of an understatement because logistically a rail car is incredibly important to Russia's military logistics, considering that most of it runs by rail. But the fact that the Lithuanians have seized anything that's labeled as property of the Russian armed forces is a pretty bold move. Even if you try and downplay it a little bit, what are the Russians going to do in response to this? This means that if anything of Russia's that's labeled as the Russian armed forces tries to pass from Kaliningrad and then into Belarus, it could probably be seized by the Lithuanians, and at this point, the Russians have not laid out a precedent as making a diplomatic stink over this kind of stuff, and so we may see the Lithuanians also getting some free Russian military equipment via the involuntary Lend-Lease that the Russians have been contributing to over the past 8 months. And so with that, that's the end of that little bit of news, and of course, pretty interesting to see. And before we move on into our location unknowns, which we have a pretty good amount of, and we're going to be starting off taking a look at a Ukrainian helicopter launching some rockets at Russian positions, a very cool video to watch, I've seen that a lot of y'all have voted on a poll, specifically talking about the public endorsement of Kherson evacuations by Putin. And so before we get to the location unknowns, I want to know what y'all think about that poll. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, folks, so let's jump right into these two polls that we have. And the first one says, is Putin's public endorsement of Kherson evacuations indicative that bad things are about to happen? It looks like 49%, actually now 50% said, yes, something big is coming. 33% said, I don't know, it's inconclusive. And 17% said, no, it is simply a retreat. Now, for me, I have to say, I'm going to take the cop-out answer and say, I don't really know as of yet, but I was talking to the enforcer before stream, and it seems to me like something is brewing again behind the scenes. And I know y'all are probably very tired of the nuclear talk at this point, but recently Xi Jinping also came out and said that Putin should not use a nuke. So it seems like there's something going on behind the scenes, once again, that we don't know about, but I'm not really sure. So I have to take the 33% option. But Enforcer, what do you think?
I would have to go with the 17% that said it's simply a retreat, and I know that goes against the large majority, but allow me to explain real quick why I think it's a simple retreat. First off, I've seen this happen 4 times at this point during this war. Well, no, really more like 3. One was at Kyiv when the Russians retreated out of there. Everyone went, oh my god, they're giving up the whole northeast because they're going to glass the entire thing and turn it into a wasteland. And here we are 8 months later, and that entire area is still pretty green for the most part. Not a lot of glass in the ground. We've also seen that similarly down in the northeastern region. When the Russians started to withdraw from this area, everyone went, oh my god, the Russians are retreating because they're going to drop a nuke. Now about two and a half months later, the Russians still have not dropped a nuke. This right here appears to be another move by the Russians to retreat and try and strengthen their positions on a smaller and more defensible front line on the other side of the Dnipro River. The Russians also, to explain this, are evacuating Kherson citizens and encouraging them to evacuate because now it's bad optically if they didn't. They now consider these people and call them citizens of the Russian Federation, and so if they did not try and do anything like telling these citizens to evacuate, now, optically, it could be spun that the Russian government is now leaving behind Russian citizens on Russian land to a fate against the terrible Satanist Nazi Ukrainians, or whatever the Russians are calling them these days. And so that's why the Russians are most likely ordering the evacuation of citizens from Kherson, so that way it looks like they're actually taking care of these people that they now call Russian, although they're Ukrainian. That's the way I'm seeing it. Of course, everyone has their own way of seeing it, but I have heard many times in this war that something big is just around the corner. And one thing that I know that everyone's been here for is that every single month, almost like clockwork, the Belarusians are about to join the war any day now. It almost comes around on a monthly cycle at this point. Something big's about to happen. They're going to push across the border and create a new front. The Ukrainians are going to get split in two. They're going to get slaughtered, and then it never happens. We've also seen the talk of And let me just remind y'all of some of the big day events that were supposed to be happening a while ago. May 9th, on the May 9th Victory Day parade, Russia was supposed to declare that it was a full-on war and do a complete mobilization and steamroll the Ukrainians in. It never happened. On Ukrainian Independence Day, they were supposed to declare that it was a full-on war, drop a tactical nuke, roll in the whole military. That never happened either. I just don't see where this time it's going to be a big deal, because this kind of stuff has happened multiple times throughout this war, and I've never seen anything happen out of it. Everyone's always holding their breath, and I think it's mostly like, you know, for example, most of this from what I'm hearing is coming from mainstream news, which ought to tell you how truthful it is. Most of this is to keep people watching on TV and letting the ads roll, so that way someone can make a massive amount of cash off of people clicking on the TV and waiting for November 7th to come around and a slaughterhouse to happen or something similar. I just don't see it happening. Also, the Chinese coming out and making that statement is not too out of place. The Chinese have largely been saying over the course of this war that the Russians and the Ukrainians should find some way to amicably end the war, because it's not in anyone's interest for the war to continue. And so this seems to be normal Chinese talk, now talking about what the Russians are always alluding at and not alluding at, and saying that they won't do, but they will do, and maybe, let's just wait, is about the nuclear situation. And now they're also weighing in on it, much like the Indians and the Pakistanis have been for months now, and they joined in a little late, around month 5 of the war. And so with that, I hope that addresses the poll. In my opinion, of course, once again, everyone has their own opinions, and of course there's nothing wrong. Everyone could be right at the end of the day. Everyone could be wrong at the end of the day, but that's what I'm thinking right now. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
Although, unfortunately, you have to wonder if both the U.S. president and the president of China, or at least what they call him a president, if they're both saying the same thing, what would be the benefit to say that if they didn't have some kind of intelligence?
Well, what is the benefit of every country in the world telling North Korea that they shouldn't nuke South Korea yearly? You know, because that happens yearly as well, almost. The whole entire point of it is showing that it will have international condemnation, and there will be no support from any nation worldwide that would encourage them to do something and think that they'll maybe have an ally if things start going south or if things go the other direction. It's nothing more than diplomatic moves by the Chinese to show that they will not join Russia's side side if they were to do something that outrageous and that insane as to nuke Ukraine. That's really all I'm saying, because like, we could draw the same conclusion with North Korea. Every single time a nuclear test is about to happen or something similar, almost every nation in the world comes out from the woodworks going, no, 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 don't do it, don't start nuclear war. And we could always go, each time that happens, nuclear war is on the horizon, the North Koreans are launching a nuke at San Francisco right now, but it just never happens. It's all just diplomatic, I guess you could say diplomatic plays to show who's on whose side if something in the future was to hypothetically happen. And so with that, that's kind of my input on that. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and next up, we have the second poll, which said, what do you think of the U.S. privately asking Zelensky to entertain peace talks with Russia? It looks like 69% said bad advice. It's not a good option. 19% said I'm undecided, and 12% said peace is preferable. That is good advice. Now, on this one, I've got to say that I don't see any viable peace talks without giving up Ukraine's land that was rightfully theirs. So if that is the case and they have to try to give up land to have peace, I'm not sure if I'd be in favor of that at all, because Ukraine shouldn't be giving up their land. Too much blood has been shed at this point to give it up. But that's just my take. But Enforcer, what do you think?
I would have to say that's a poor idea at this point, considering that the Russians are now on the back foot. They have no international backing whatsoever, and the Chinese have started to make it clearer and clearer as the months have gone by, although it's been a very slow process, that they are not really aligned with Russia, and they would not be supporting any actions they take in the future, which is crucially important because the Chinese are the second largest economy on Earth, only seconded by the United States, which has an economy of around 20 trillion. So if the Russians could count on the Chinese for some kind of economic backing or some kind of military support, it is hypothetically possible that the war could continue on. But the Chinese have made it clear that they will not provide any of that serious kind of support or economic support that would help the Russians to keep alive and keep this war going. And so by that instance, we can see that the Ukrainians have a lot more support from the West and that the war can continue to keep on going. And so for that reason, and considering that they have now changed the entire situation on the front line into their advantage, and we can now see the Russians pulling the typical last-ditch offensive attempt at trying to turn the war around, which will most likely fail, I would see no reason for the Ukrainians trying to negotiate some kind of peace. They do have the possibility here within the next few months to retake all of the land that they have lost so far, and why not? So in that instance, I would have to say it's a very poor decision. I would have to agree with the majority of y'all. The war should continue, and the Ukrainians should regain the ground that's lost and make sure not to leave thousands, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Ukrainian citizens subjugated and captured pretty much behind Russian lines and suffer them to their own fates, like the ones in Mariupol, Berdyansk, Melitopol, and Kherson. And so with that, I hope that addresses that poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one. If we don't have one, I've also seen a whole load of interesting live chats come through, and let's see about answering some of those live chats.
All right, so that was our last poll. So moving on to our first Super Chat question, we have a $50 donation from Justice Ryan, a longtime channel viewer and legend, who says, Enforcer Matt, and also Enforcer, welcome back. I don't know what happened last night, but I'm sure everyone was worried about you too, and I'm glad the streams are back on, and as the old saying goes, the show must go on.
And thank you so much for the support, Justice Ryan. And once again, recap real quick what happened leading up to last night's stream. I was incredibly exhausted, still kind of tired, just trying to make sure to pace myself here, but it is, and I gotta say this, and I don't like to say it because I always make sure to sound energetic on stream like I am right now, but it is tiresome sometimes behind the scenes. Hard to wake up some days, hard to keep going because there's just so much to do, loads of college work, had to knock out a midterm today before the stream, and so there's just a lot of stuff that was going on in the background. And because of that, I got so tired last night that I sat down and I thought about having to go through the hours of work before the stream to make the map and to do all of that. And I just thought, I can't do it. I'm so exhausted that I would get to the stream and I just wouldn't be able to continue on through. And so for that reason, there was no stream last night. I made sure to put out a community post and also a post on the Discord. By the way, link in the description to the Discord if you'd like to join. And that is the reason why it didn't run. I was just exhausted. That's the first time ever in 255 days that I've ever canceled a stream because of exhaustion. It most likely will not happen again, but that was the reason why a stream didn't run. But I thank you so much for the concern, Justice Ryan, and I thank you so much for the support as well. It does help this channel to keep on running and helps us to keep on doing this like a freight train, hopefully, although yesterday was a little bit of a hiccup. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again.
All right, and next up, we have a $35 super chat from Diana DeLuna, who says, greetings, LSA and fellas in the house. To my American peeps, let's see. Before you vote, be sure to check whether your candidate supports Ukraine. America need to hang together for Ukraine and freedom, and Slava Ukraine.
And I thank you for the support. And one thing that I did say before is, well, one thing I have to say real quick before I address any of this is that we don't get into American politics on this channel, but I believe the stream before yesterday, I actually said on stream that right now there is a group that is kind of going towards the direction of we will not support Ukraine if we are elected. But one thing I gotta say, and real quick, let me just go and lift up I guess you could say the kind of policy where I don't name the names of political parties real quick to give you a little bit of historical precedent as to why that doesn't matter. If you look at Iraq and Afghanistan, through both of those wars lasted, or at least the occupation of Iraq, lasted for so long that we went through several administration changes in the meantime, and several party changes as a matter of fact. And a lot of y'all have been around, and I know a load of y'all saw this, is that each time an election came around, the party that was not in charge would sit there and say, the war in insert war, Iraq or Afghanistan, is terrible. It's horrendous for our boys to be dying over there for nothing. If you elect me, I will stop the war. The new party would be elected, they would come in charge, and then the war would continue until they were then voted out. The other party would come back in charge on the same premise that these wars were horrendous and shouldn't keep going, and then they would also keep the wars going. It was only until, I guess you could say it wasn't, well, I guess you could say until we thought that the missions had succeeded. For example, once we finally thought that Iraq's government had been, I guess you could say, solidified enough, although it was still a little bit weak, that was the moment that we then left. And in Afghanistan, that situation kind of came under the same guise, although we were terribly wrong about that. The Afghan government was not at all ready to be left on its own, and then it collapsed within a month. So it doesn't, that was still a disaster, but still, you could see that everyone was always saying that these wars were horrendous, it's time to leave, no reason for everyone to be over there, and then they would get elected and then it would keep going. And I think that's the situation we're seeing ourselves in now. While one party looks like they're vehemently against the war, if they got elected and they got in charge, one thing that they all get is little briefings, and this is something that people don't talk about a lot with Congress, is that congressmen and women, both in the House and the Senate, get briefings from military officials telling them why stuff is important, why it has to keep going, and while they'll take one position in the public, one or the other, all of them are largely one-tracked in decision-making in the background, and there's a couple that will give a little bit of resistance, but by and large, the majority will still vote on what needs to be done. So it would be beneficial to look at that as, I guess you could say, a voting requirement, but it's not going to be the end of the world if a certain group is voted in majority, because they would most likely just pick up the slack that the old party that was in charge was doing at that time, and then continue on supporting Ukraine. That's just how these kinds of things work, at least historically. And so with that, I hope that does address that question fairly well, and thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $21 super chat from BL Parak, another channel legend, who says, you could move this to fewer nights per week. Better to get enough rest and not to get burned out. Even Starsky would agree with this IMO.
And thank you for the support, BL Parak. And I do get everyone's suggestion that we should run less streams. But one thing I know is that the war is not stopping, and neither should we. And while I did last night, due to being exhausted, I don't really like the idea of setting a pattern of regular stream times. I want y'all to be able to come here every single day of the week and get a daily update on the war in Ukraine. That is what we've been doing for 256 days now, except for yesterday. And I don't want to start toning things back now. I think, really honestly, this is entirely manageable to do, although it is a little bit strenuous at times, especially when the college work gets heavy, but it's entirely manageable to do. It's just that there's a whole bunch of extra things that are now going on in the background that are starting to chew up all of the remaining strength well, not really strength, energy I have left, which led me to get just flat out exhausted yesterday. But I do thank you so much once again for the support. But one thing I gotta say is if the war doesn't stop, neither will I. I just gotta keep going. It's go big or go home, and we're going big. We're never going home. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, BL Farak. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And thank you to the three of y'all who supported us so much in helping this channel to keep on running. Y'all's support is the only way that we're able to keep this thing going, and without y'all it's not possible. And so I got to thank all three of y'all so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep alive. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into the location unknowns and checking out our first clip of some Ukrainian helicopters launching rockets at Russian positions. And so here's the video.
Holy. I just gotta say, thank you, Walter A. Lakota, for that support. That
Good
is extremely
Lord!
generous of you, Walter. Goodness gracious.
Goodness! Thank you, Walter. I think we'll have to take a special stop here in a second after this clip to address that. But real quick, I'm going to let this clip play out of the Ukrainian helicopters, and then we're going to go right back to the question segment just for 1 second. When you see the helicopters firing off their rockets. And with that, that's the end of the video, and it's nice to see that the Ukrainian helicopters are still pounding Russian positions, much like they have been throughout the entirety of the war. Of course, the Ukrainian pilots, both of the air and the aircraft and helicopters, never stop in their objectives, and while outnumbered and outgunned, it seems like they almost always succeed in getting out alive, which is a huge testament to their skill and also the intelligence of how they use their air power. And before we move on to the next clip of Location Unknown News, we real quick have to go back and address Walter A. Lakota. And so real quick, take it away, Matthew.
All right, so as y'all saw in the live chat, Walter put in an extremely generous $500 donation, and he said, Aloha Enforcer Matt, and LSA from OG Ellison Bosun. Yesterday, what said was about the Iran-Iraqi tanker wars of the 80s. It seems Russia is trying to split Kherson Oblast into two sides, like Germany and Berlin, from 1945 to 1990, and it's also looking like Russia's Tsar's army in 1904 and 1905. Russo-Japanese War, which also led to its fallout in World War I. What are your thoughts?
And those are some pretty interesting suggestions, Walter. And also, I like how you brought up the Russo-Japanese War, which we have never addressed on stream before. In case if y'all don't know anything about Japanese history, real quick summary from like 1855 onwards to explain how, I guess you could say, East Asia kind of evolved. The Japanese were an isolationist country. A guy called Oliver Hazard Perry arrived from the United States in Japan with gunships. And just in case y'all don't know, Japan was a very backwards country technologically at the time. They really didn't have a concept of what the outside world looked like or the technology that everyone else had. So when Oliver Hazard Perry showed up with steam-powered gunships, they practically looked like aliens. And so what he pretty much said was, open your doors or we're going to blast them open. And then the Japanese were like, oh crap, I think this guy's for real. And so what they did is that they were like, okay, that's a good idea. And then the Japanese became Britphiles. Like, there's no other way to explain it. They went to Britain. Real quick, I don't know if we'll have to keep the question segment going here in a second, but let me continue this story real quick to address Walter A. Lakota. So the British entertained the Japanese. The Japanese traveled around the world. They had never sailed pretty much beyond their shores, but for the first time they were. It's very interesting to listen to their stories of their international travels and how different and odd the world was to them. But they went to Britain and they were like, ah, yes, these people got it going on. And so they went back to Japan And these Japanese who were dressed as samurai, because the samurai were the delegations that were being sent around the world to figure out what was out there now, they came back to Japan and they were like, hey guys, the British have got all these cool things like a parliament and suits and guns and weapons. We ought to implement all this stuff in Japan. And so what happened is that they had this thing called the Meiji Restoration, which pretty much turned Japan into this like quasi-British and traditional Japanese mix, which is really weird. And so, anyways, we're not going to go through all the little nitty-gritty details. By the time the Japanese were fighting the Russians in 1904, they had practically become the Britain of the Pacific. They had a very similar government system, not the same traditions. Of course, they still had, I guess you'd say, traditional Japanese leftover traditions like the Bushido and such things like that. But they still were a largely westernized country. They did that all on their own because they thought that was the only way to viably compete with the West, was just to become them. You know, I guess you could say they went with the phrase, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. So they obliterated the Russians in 1904 and 1905 because they may as well have just been Britain, but on the other side of the world. So moving back from that and into Ukraine, now that we've gotten that out of the way, Germany, and I guess you could say that they are trying to split Kherson into a East and West Berlin kind of thing, divided along the Dnieper River, because one thing that both sides know is that the Dnieper River is an uncrossable, I guess you could say, barrier that will now divide them from here forward, and that's one of the main reasons why the Russians are retreating to the southern end. However, that does not mean that the Ukrainians could not retake that. There are, of course, other land routes, the Zaporizhia area, where they could push through and they could retake that ground, but still, that is a fairly good point right there. And I'd also have to say that the Russians at this point, they do look like the Russo-Japanese War. Speaking of all that, they're almost going up against an overly technological force like the Japanese were, compared to the outdated, under-equipped, and under-trained Russian forces. Also, if y'all have never heard of the Battle of Tsushima, Russian inaptitudes go back a long ways. And you can easily see them then. But with that, I thank you so much once again for the unbelievable support, Walter. You've helped out this channel loads and have helped us to keep on running for a decently long time. And I thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep alive and helping us to keep going. And so with that, I hope I've addressed that fairly. Also, real quick, yesterday what was said about the Iraqi tanker wars of the 80s, it seems Russia's trying to... Oh, okay. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, Walter A. Lakota. You've helped us out tremendously, and of course, that is a massive amount of support, and I'm highly honored to think that you find us worthy of that support and want us to keep this channel running. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope we addressed that fairly well. And real quick, Matthew, I'm debating whether we should keep the question segment going for a second or not, because we have got massive amounts of support from people, and I don't want to just continue on the news and not give them a huge amount of thanks for what they're doing to help us to keep running.
So yes, we do have to call out a few more, and also Paul Fitzgerald put in a $500 donation himself, but he didn't put a comment.
He didn't even leave a comment.
I asked Paul for a comment, but I'm not sure if he's even here anymore. I think he might have left the super chat and left. Paul, if you're still here, please put a question into the live chat. For $500, we have to answer your question, man.
Dude, Paul, I'm Paul. You know what I say. And I gotta thank you so much for support. You didn't leave a comment, but the massive amount of support does help this channel to keep on running, and for that reason, I thank you so much, because that support helps this channel to keep alive, helps the lights to keep on, it helps the wheels to keep turning, and it helps the Lee Spring Army and us to just keep moving forward. And so I thank you so much once again. That is unbelievable. And so with that, we're going to get back to the news, so that way we don't hover around on this too long. But I got to thank you and Walter so much once again for helping this channel to keep alive. And so with that, we are now going to be moving on into the next bit of news here on day 255, where we can see that a Russian tank had a little bit of an accident, a little bit of a problem. Now, Matthew, tell me what's wrong with this picture.
Doesn't look like the tracks on the ground.
It doesn't look like the tracks are on the ground, and it looks like the tank is upside down. Now, if this was in Australia, this would look normal, but in all Ukraine, this does not look normal. You see, the world isn't upside down here, it's right side up. And so the tanks ought to be right side up too, and hopefully not on fire, but it looks like the Russians have different plans for their tanks, and it now looks like they're preparing for a special military operation in Australia. And so with that, we're going to let the video wrap out. Once again, a showering mess. And with that, we're now going to be moving on into the next clip of Location Unknown News, where we can see that a fox has decided that things are getting pretty rough. And I got to tell you, Matthew, wars are getting pretty intense when the foxes are also trying to arm themselves as well.
Say.
When you see this fox right here trying to equip itself with a gat. It's grabbed the rifle sling of this AK and is trying to drag it away from this Ukrainian soldier's camp. Quite the industrious fox. I wish it the best on its endeavors, and maybe we'll see Rise of the Planet of the Fox here in the future.
Is the soldier scared of the fox?
I don't know. I think he's just watching it or something. It's really weird, but still it's hilarious because honestly, Matthew, this thing is like pulling it like it's seriously trying to drag it back to a den or something so it'll have a gun to defend itself with. Like, look at it. It's
Even
like
the foxes need those gats.
oh man. I can't think of any fox-related jokes to make on this one, but I guess you could say that this guy, this little fox, is cunning like a fox. And so with that,
I gotta steal a joke real quick from S. Stefano. He said, "Looks like Fox News is on the front line."
oh no,
That was a good one, Stefano.
oh, no. And so with that, thank you for the joke, Stefano. Also, that was a pretty good one to read off. I didn't see it, but that was gold. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from day 255's Location Unknown News, and that very interesting look at that fox. Anyways, that wouldn't be a good joke. That one would probably not have a good enough context behind. But anyways, we're moving on to day 256's Location Unknown News, where we can see a Ukrainian sniper taking out Russians in the night. And so with that, here's the video. Of course, there's some rap music going with this. We can see two Russians walking out in the middle of an open field. Now, one question I've got, Matthew, is why are they crouching and kind of walking in the middle of a wide open field? Like that's going to help them.
I have no idea.
So we can see them moving on along, and in the next clip here, we can see them, looks like they're prone on the ground now, and they're just hanging out. We can see that they've now made it to the tree line and are moving around there, and now we can see the sniper lining them up. We now see him fire, and one goes down. We can now see another Russian in the tree line. I don't think he's aware that the other guy has not really had a fun time. We can now see his shot fired, and it looks like he disappeared as well. We can now see some other guys, and it looks like he also fired there, and another one disappeared. We now see even another guy. This is the fourth one. Sniper fires, and he goes down. Four Russian soldiers and 4 naps. This sniper did a pretty freaking decent job, and of course, that shows y'all how effective Ukrainian snipers and snipers by and large can still be. These Ukrainian snipers are not hitting any kind of amazing long shots at 2 miles or 1 mile distance. It looks like their shots are at 800 yards at most, but these snipers are still incredibly effective in making sure to plant the seeds of low morale and defeatism within the Russian infantry, and also helping them to, I guess you could say, lay low and take a nap for a little bit. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on to the next clip of Location Unknown News, where we can see a Russian tank being hit by some kind of munition. We don't know exactly what kind, but it was fairly effective. And so here's the video. We can also hear some copyrighted music, which we're not big fans of on this channel, but we can see a Russian tank right there. We can now see the drone flying towards it, and oh my goodness, a munition. Well, we know it was carried by a drone, but we don't know what kind of munition it was that it was carrying, because the explosion was quite large, actually. We see some toilet paper flying off of the tank. And with that, that is the end of the video, but once again, a pretty interesting look at a Russian APC getting the short end of a stick due to a Ukrainian kamikaze drone with an unknown ordnance on the bottom of it. Regardless whether it's unknown or not, it did a pretty good job. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can once again see another Ukrainian kamikaze drone. When you see the compound being highlighted, we can hear some heavy metal, and we can now see the Russians driving a mint green Lada, or a similar vehicle. They are now getting out of the Lada, and they're walking through the compound, and these Ukrainians have decided that they do not like the mint green Lada, or whatever the world that is. We can now see them equipping a fairly large drone with a fairly large explosive, and equipping it to the bottom. We can now see this drone glowing orange on the infrared, flying into its target, and creating a nice fireball. We can now see the fireball dissipating. Oh my god! What was that? Like, what in the world were they carrying on that? The whole compound is gone!
Let's see it again.
Okay, wait, real quick, look, for context, here's the before picture. That's what it looks like beforehand. This is the after picture of what happened after the compound. What in the world was he carrying? Like a...
Who knows? It was something large, obviously, though.
Right here, we don't know it, but they did get a Davy Crockett, and they're getting it ready right there to put on the bottom of the drone. I don't even know what in the world could cause that kind of damage explosively, in just one hit. But oh my god, look at that again. The whole compound's gone. The roof is gone. The windows have been blown out. It looks like some of the walls are leaning in a little bit. That's insane. I don't even know what could have done that. If anyone has an idea of what kind of explosive, I guess you could say explosive powder or explosive charge could do something similar to that, please let me know, because I want to know what in the world the Ukrainians are filling these explosives with to take out an entire compound with something that looks like 50 pounds of explosives. That's just insane. And anyways, with that, we're going to let the video round out. But huge credit to the Ukrainians and their ingenuity, because they are making sure to show the Russians who does not like mint green cars. With that, we're now moving on into the next clip, well, the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see the casualty report on day 256. And oh man, it's not looking good for them. Another 600 troops lost today, bringing the number up to 75,440. They are now just 25,000 soldiers away from losing 100,000 men. And real quick, just to do a little bit of maths for y'all, if they lost average 750 soldiers a day, and they were just trying to make their way to 100,000, let's divide the number here. It's only going to take them another month at this kind of casualty rate to reach 100,000 killed. That would be an entire quarter additional soldiers lost at that point. Well, actually, the next month alone at these casualty rates will make up a quarter of what they've lost over 9 months of fighting. 1 month making up a quarter of their losses. That shows you how poorly the war is going at this point, is that such a short amount of time can account for such a high amount of their losses. And that right there, once again, to reiterate, is why I'm saying we're in the end war phase now. This war is not really grinding down, it more so looks like it's speeding up, but when wars exponentially speed up in the amount of casualties that forces are taking, that usually means that the length of the war is exponentially slowing down, and we'll most likely see this war come to a close by the summer of next year. There's no way at these kinds of casualties that the Russians can continue to go on. They do not have the tanks, the armored personnel carriers, the supplies, the manpower, or anything for that matter, to be able to keep the Russian army going for that much longer, especially losing 600 to 1,000 soldiers a day now. And we can also see that the Russians have lost another 8 tanks today, 21 armored personnel carriers, 4 towed artillery pieces, an anti-aircraft system, 2 helicopters, 12 drones, 10 supply trucks, and 2 cruise missiles, almost bringing up the shot-down cruise missiles to 400, which is getting quite close. But with that is the end of those little snippets of information, and I think y'all can get the picture that things are not going well for the Russians, and the war will most likely be ending a lot faster at this point than it has before. I wish and we'll try and look around for this. I wish I could find y'all some kind of casualty reports and information on the Germans in World War I and World War II to show y'all that when their daily casualty rates started to exponentially increase compared to the rest of the war usually ended just about a year or a couple of months later, depending on which war it was. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from the Russian casualty report, and we're now going to be moving on to the last bit of location unknown news, where we can see that a couple of Russians surrendered via the surrender hotline. And so with that, here's the video.
Колесников Константин Алексеевич, призван с Белгородской области. Дата рождения 06.10.1989. Благодарю спонсоров за спасенную мою жизнь.
Я Клеменов Денис Сергеевич из Белгородской области, город Староскол. Дата рождения 5.05.1994 год. Благодарю спонсоров за спасение моей жизни. Звание рядовой, должность оператор.
And with that, then seeing that little video, but I gotta say, these guys have picked the good way out. Of course, staying on the Russian front lines at this point is practically a death sentence, and so surrendering seems to be a much more preferable alternative for these soldiers, and it looks like they took that route out. Of course, thanks to the Ukrainian, I guess you could say, surrender hotline. If you ever feel like surrendering and you are a Russian watching the stream, just call up the number listed. I don't really know where it's listed, but make sure to call
1-800-SURRENDER?
1-800-SURRENDER. And you, too, can become a Russian prisoner of war. Or, I guess you could say, well, yeah, it would be a Russian prisoner of war. And so with that, that's the end of our location unknown news. Of course, call 1-800-SURRENDER now. That's 1-800-SURRENDER now. And if you surrender now, we will also throw in a free 2 weeks of bread. That's 1-800-SURRENDER now. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from our location unknowns, and we're now going to be moving towards the northeastern area at the front line and covering all of the news from the northeastern area, because surprisingly enough, there's not a lot of news coming out of this area, but we can see that the Russians aren't really doing anything here, and this is, of course, indicative of what the rest of the front line may be looking like, and also what the situation really is for the Russians, again, and reiterating what we said earlier. But before we get to this little clip of the first airborne hitting a Russian tank, let's go over a poll real quick, because this has been one of the most unanimous polls I've ever seen, with 1,300 of y'all voting on it. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so we have 2 polls as usual, and the question on the first one says, Iran claims they only shipped drones to Russia before the war began. What say you? 91% say that Iran is lying. 5% said I have no idea, and 4% said Iran is telling the truth. Now, I think it goes without saying that Iran is most likely lying, and it looks like most of you think that as well. But Enforcer, what say you?
They're lying. I mean, like, I don't even think it's really a question. I think it's more, and that's why it's a unanimous poll. It's more so of a fact. The Iranians are lying right now. There's no way that all of these suicide drones made it into Russia before the war, and the Russians decided to use them almost 5 months in, while having them the entire time. That seems to be an illogical statement, full of bullcrap. And when you look at it on the surface like that, it makes no sense. If the Russians had them the whole time, why weren't they using them the whole time? They only used them after Putin went down to Iran in a special visit, and then all of a sudden these things started to appear on the front lines about a month or 3 weeks later. So it doesn't seem to be the case. That seems to be an outright lie by the Iranians, and that's why I wouldn't trust it either. And of course, I thank everyone for voting on that poll. It's quite a lot of people who voted. 1,300 of y'all. Pretty high. And of course, with that, on to the next one.
All right, and the next poll says, both the president of the U.S. and China have warned Putin about using nukes in Ukraine. What happens? And this kind of tied into what we were talking about earlier. It's surprisingly pretty split on the poll. It looks like 41% said there's still a possibility of a nuke, and 36% said nothing. The statements mean zero, while 23% said I don't know. So pretty interesting results. I thought it was going to lean more toward the statements mean zero, but it looks like there's actually more saying there's a possibility of it. So, Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say I don't see the possibility of a nuke being used, because one thing that everyone has to remember is that a nation does not work on emotional, quick decisions. And that's that you can see throughout the entirety of history. Most decisions are very calculated. Countries are run somewhat similarly to a corporate board, because corporate boards and countries have a lot of moving parts in them pertaining to people and their decision-making power. So going off of that, Russia would be looking at a long term, and here's the situation that they're looking at now with using a nuke. They used a nuke in Ukraine. They receive international condemnation. The Chinese, which are their only lifeline of support at this point, and they're hardly supporting them right now, would be completely shut off and would probably join the rest of the world in a coalition against Russia. The United States, of course, has already laid out that they would militarily get involved, which would then occur. We would see U.S. forces rolling into Ukraine and also amassing on the Baltic borders and also in Finland to then start offensives pushing towards St. Petersburg, Moscow, and Volgograd. These front lines would literally shift within hours. The Russians would immediately be in the retreat in all directions. And then, because the Russians hoped that using this tactical nuclear weapon would turn the tide in the war in Ukraine, they have now turned the entire tide of the war and the entire tide of the fate of their nation in the opposite direction, where they are now on the losing side, meaning that their only option at that point would be using their entire nuclear arsenal to most likely attack this international coalition. The international coalition would obliterate them in return, and then no one wins. So I can't see them using a nuke, because that is a situation, that is the only route that option would lead down to. It would lead to mutually assured destruction. So if you're going to use a tactical nuke in Ukraine, you might as well just unload the entire nuclear arsenal, if it's even operational, onto the rest of the world, because that will be the inevitable, I guess you could say, the inevitable ends that decision will lead to. At least that's what I'm seeing, and that seems to be the most logical route. Because one thing that has been made clear by everyone at this point, including the Chinese, which will most likely bolster the West to follow through, is that the Russians will get no support from anyone if they make that kind of decision. And so with that, I hope that addresses that poll fairly well. And what are your thoughts on it, Matthew?
Well, actually, let me go back and look at that poll here for a second, because I've gotten so tied up in the live chat. Let's see here. Looks like the question, I would have to say that, honestly, Enforcer, my mind's too distracted with the chat right now.
All right. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. So moving on to our super chats, we have a $100 donation from Susan G, who says, Enforcer, do you think it was Putin's body doubles when Putin was meeting with the conscripts or visiting injured soldiers? I think he's not brave nor cares about his citizens to go out in public like President Zelensky. Slava Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the massive amount of support, Susan G. That helps this channel to keep on running. And I thank y'all so much once again for helping the Lee Spring Army to stay alive. But real quick, to answer that question, because it's a pretty good one, whenever you see these video clips come out of Putin visiting someplace or going somewhere, that is him. That is usually something that is very interesting to look at with body doubles, is that the body doubles are used as a distraction, and they set up, I guess you could say, similar convoys and similar security for the body doubles as they do Putin. And so let's say that Putin goes to St. Petersburg. They'll have a body double going to Kazan, and they'll also have a body double going to Vladivostok, doing similar events. So that way it appears that there are 3 possible places that Putin could be going to, and which one is he really at? And then, of course, that's found out literally on the moment of he's in the convoy going to St. Petersburg. If there were assassins, they could be in any one of the 3 places: Kazan, Vladivostok, St. Petersburg. It would be a matter of fortune or luck if they showed up at the right place. Putin then goes to this, I guess you could say, publicity stunt. The cameras are there. The cameras are there with all of them, but the only ones that are broadcast are the ones where Putin really is. To have body doubles around, the body doubles look similar, but body doubles are never exact. And if you look at their exact, I guess you could say, facial features, it is a little bit easy sometimes, and you can see him whenever there's an example that floats around where they are certainly not the person they're supposed to be. There are Kim Jong-un body doubles, and I believe we may have seen one before, and he kind of looks like Kim Jong-un, but not really. So the person you are seeing on camera is Putin. Obviously, he does not care for these people, but he has to do a little bit of fan service, I guess you could say, for the Russian public to make it look like he does. This is very similar to back in 2015 when he was traveling around Russia by and large and looking at the agricultural sector and the completed Kerch Bridge. And, well, actually, that was years later. But in 2015, he did a lot of stuff like that. And his body doubles, of course, were traveling around, but we never get to see the body doubles. And they're usually just made as a distraction for assassins to go that way instead of the way that Putin's going. And so with that, I hope that does address that comment fairly well. He does not care regardless, but you always have to, as a leader, even if you are a dictator, you always have to make it look like you care. That's why Kim Jong-un travels around on North Korean television and TV and news, and you'll see him visit some factory workers and some soldiers near the border. And it's all just a show. It's to make people think you care when really we know that these people have no care at all for their citizens. And so with that, I hope that does address that question fairly well. A really good one, by the way. And also, thank you so much once again for the support. Zelensky is a little bit of an exception. I guess you could say he's what the West views as a normal wartime leader, much like Churchill or FDR. He goes out of his way to put himself in truly dangerous situations to kind of make a point. In case if y'all didn't know, Churchill actually, and this is a cool story, did you know this, Matthew, that Churchill actually got fired at in the Second World War by the Germans?
I did not.
It was 1944 in, I believe, Belgium. They took Churchill on a little bit of a tour at the front lines, and Churchill decided to climb up onto a berm, with a railroad berm that was leading to a bridge, you know, so it's kind of like an elevated place where you can pretty much see the whole entire surrounding. He went up there with some of the most important people in the British military, including General Bernard Montgomery. They stood there, and the Germans saw them and started firing at them with larger guns like artillery. The artillery started raining around. Bernard Montgomery went running off the berm, and this is a true story that was accounted by multiple people after the war. They didn't say anything about it during the war itself, but afterwards they did. Bernard Montgomery, the general in charge of the British Armed Forces, went running off the berm, and Churchill stood there with the artillery landing around him, smoking a cigar and laughing, and then he got off the berm, hopped back in the car, and told everyone in the car, well, you know, and of course, like in that Churchill voice, well, this is quite thrilling, you know? So they went to the next part of the front lines, reviewed a couple of soldiers, and they did not speak about that until about 7 years after the war. And so Churchill, much like, I guess you could say, Zelensky, especially at the very beginning of the war, was putting himself in a little bit of precarious and dangerous circumstances, really more so for Churchill's bemusement than anything else. He just found it entertaining, and also being in the military before, he did find himself in the occasional, I guess you could say, scrap here and there. But with that, I hope y'all enjoyed that little story. It's a fun one. Y'all can also find a great recounting of that story on Mark Felton's channel. Great channel. I love his stories and like the history that he covers. It's some of the smaller, more obscure stuff. And of course, you know, regardless of Churchill's policies or anything like that, he was a pretty cool guy. So with that, we are on to the next one. And I thank you so much once again for the support. And I hope that does address the comment fairly well once again, Susan.
All right, so up next, we have a $50 super chat from Panama Floyd, who says, about Belarus, in my opinion, if Lukashenko sends them, they'll turn around and march into Minsk after the first 3 days. RFE/RL and TVP, man, the Poles seriously hate the Russians. Go watch. Seem to show that Ukraine is prepared for the possibility.
And thank you so much for the support, Panama Floyd. And to address all of that real quick, let me make sure. If Lukashenko sends them, they'll turn around and march into Minsk. That is probably the reason, because it was planned at the beginning, and we could see that it was clearly a part of Lukashenko and Putin's plan for the Belarusians to join the war and support the Russian forces that were in the northern area. They never did, because from what we heard, there were practically mutinies going on all the way to the very top of the Belarusian military structure, where generals were refusing to follow orders, and so the Belarusian military sat there stagnant and didn't do anything, and that's why they're still not doing anything, is because the military situation in Belarus is very fragile. If they try and use them, it most likely will backfire, and the Belarusian military will be used against Lukashenko to overthrow them. So I would entirely agree with that 100%. Moving on to the next part, RFE, RL, and TVP, man, the Poles seriously hate the Russians. Go watch, seem to show that Ukraine is prepared for this possibility. The Polish have a little bit of a history of hating on, I guess you could say, the Russians more so than the Germans. They kind of, they don't really hate anyone, but I guess you could say if there was any kind of cultural animosity, there would be a decent amount towards the Russians, because while the Germans treated the Polish poorly in the Second World War, not a lot is said about how poorly the Soviets treated the Polish as well. And one thing that a lot of people don't know is that Stalin left the Polish out to dry in 1944 during the Warsaw Uprising, and did not support them. In fact, stopped the entire Russian army at that point to allow the Germans to crush the Polish resistance, and then they rolled through once that had been completed. So I guess you could say that the Poles don't really have a historical reason for liking anything associated with Russia, and I would have to agree with you completely. And the Ukrainians, of course, going back to that, are prepared just in case the Belarusians did roll across the border. They would be foolish not to be prepared, because then you'd be enticing them to do something like that. But I'm incredibly certain that it will not happen. We've heard that the Belarusians will join the war 8 times at this point, once every month in this war, and it's just never happened yet. But I thank you so much once again for the support, Panama and Floyd, and I would entirely agree with you that the Belarusians are never going to join this war for that reason. And so with that, we are on to the final question of the segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the last bit of news for the night.
All right, and the final one of the segment goes to Applesauce Man, who puts in a $50 donation and says, #BattleFox.
Let me tell you something, Applesauce Man. Have you ever wanted to get your... I don't feel like I'm doing the Sam Elliott voice well tonight. So
#BattleFox.
Yeah, that's a better one than me tonight. I think the high pitch hype voice is starting to leach into my Sam Elliott a little bit. But thank you so much once again for the support, Applesauce Man. And also #battle. That's actually a really cool thing to call that, BattleFox. Is BattleFox, because it is getting an AK. Maybe that ought to become a new symbol of, I guess you could say, the Ukrainian Armed Forces, or that specific unit. They ought to make that fox their mascot. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, Applesauce Man. And thank you so much for recognizing that incredibly brave BattleFox. And so with that, we've reached the end of this question segment. Of course, I thank you all so much for your support. It helps this channel to keep on running and helps us to keep the lights on behind the scenes, so that way we can keep covering this news every single day. And with that, it is now time to wrap up the news for the night, starting off in the northeastern area, where we can see that the 1st Airborne hit a tank. We can see the Russian tank rolling down the road. The road looks like something similar to a muddy water park or a Kentucky Derby. We can now see a Ukrainian. Look at this little fella.
Oh, nani?
Oh, nani?
He came walking out there so slick, too.
he just nonchalantly just pimped walked his way out there onto the street. And, ooh.
Oh.
Got the tank right in the rear of the turret, right on the side, most likely puncturing right into the crew compartment and knocking that tank out.
How did they not see him? All the trees are dead, basically, aren't they?
Yeah, pretty much, but they didn't see it. Oh, wait a minute, look at that. Double kill. Look at that. This thing next, it red rovered the other Russian tank on that road, knocking out its tank's probably sight alignment and a bunch of other things. So pretty much a double kill right there. They got 2 in 1. We now see the tank having a secondary explosion. Not good for the tank's longevity. And we can now see the tank further down the road, just burning in a large pyre. With that, that's the end of the video. But once again, huge shout out to Mr. Cripwalk down here, who just cripwalked his way right out the tree line and shot the thing right in the back. Let's watch that again, Cripwalk. I mean, that man was confident. He went out there with a mission, and it was to blow that thing away, and he did a good job. And so with that, and also he disappeared as quickly as he popped up. He literally just disappeared back into the trees. And with that,
was he out there by himself?
Probably not. But if he was, even more credit to the guy. This guy has got balls to just step up behind a Russian tank and blow it away. And so with that, that's the end of that video. But once again, a nice look at the 1st Airborne and what they've been doing. Moving on to the next clip from today, we can once again see another UR-77 meteorite clearing a path for the Ukrainian infantry. We see the meteorite right there, tightening up its charge, getting ready to blow it up. And now we can see them clear a path I'm sure it's quite clear. And so with that, that's the end of the video, but I gotta say, I always like to see a nice meteorite clearing a path for a Ukrainian advance. Nothing like it. Moving on south of Svatove, we also saw that the 79th Brigade was hitting some Russians with some drones. Quite effectively, I'd say. And so with that, here's the video. We can see them putting some tape onto the front of the bomblet. We can now hear them playing the copyright-free music that a lot of people play on gaming channels. Because nothing's better than a good goof and funny segment. We can now see them clipping the bomblet to the bottom of the drone and getting it ready to go out on its mission. We now see the drone taking off and going on its way to do good deeds. Here it is looking at a trench line. Here it is looking at Russians. Here it is looking at even more Russians. Here it is looking at another Russian trench. Here it is looking at a sleeping Russian. Here it is looking at walking Russians, running Russians, hiding Russians, meteorites, T-72s, everything in between. Here it is dropping a bomblet. There it is putting more Russians into naps. Goodness.
It's like the magic trick.
Here we can see more Russians trying to run. Here we can see it doing even more work. I think this has got to be the most effective drone of the war. Oh my god! Well, there goes a meteorite. Oh my lord.
That tank was packing.
Here goes a Russian main battle tank. Here goes another one. Just in case you didn't find it funny the first time, here's a montage of it. Here's a BTR-82 on fire. And with that, that's the end of the video. But I hope y'all enjoyed that nice little clip of the 79th Brigade teaching Russians why they should no longer be in Ukraine and why that war support percentage ought to go down a few notches. With that, we're now going to be moving to the area of Lysychansk, where we once again seen the great, glorious, indomitable Russian Ministry of Defense showing us their glorious Uragans firing to defend the motherland and to defend all of the Russian-speaking people. But you know what's sad about this video? These Uragans aren't doing anything to change the situation for Russia. They may as well just be firing for fun. Not even for training. These guys probably even don't know what they're firing at or if it's hitting. But still, here's the video of them firing off some Uragans. Also, real quick, they always have that same music playing in the background. It sounds like a movie trailer. We can now see, of course, the favorite thing. The Russians have a thing with showing stuff getting loaded. We can now see the Uragans on the move, going out into a field. We now see them aiming their Uragans. We now see them firing their Uragans. We now see them hitting a tree line. Well, more like a forest, really.
More trees getting hit.
The Russians are just... They're definitely not tree huggers, I'll tell you that. We never saw Ukrainian forces in the tree line, but they certainly did take it out on a couple of oak trees. With that, we're now going to be moving on into the next bit of news out of the northeastern area. But one thing we can say about the northeastern area is that there isn't a large amount of activity here. From what we're seeing, the Ukrainians are still inflicting some casualties on the Russians, and the Russians are, of course, keeping up a small amount of fire, but no large activities whatsoever, which is once again reinforcing the idea that this area in Bakhmut is the last-ditch offensive. Meanwhile, in Orlivka, we saw that there was an unsuccessful attack in the Donetsk region that was filmed by the Ukrainian forces. The Russians tried and then failed to storm the position. And so, here's the video. Wait a minute. Real quick, I'm actually going to have to delete this one because I just remembered I actually found the exact location of this later on. So, real quick, I'm going to delete that. And we're now going to be moving down a little bit further in the Donetsk region to Avdiivka, where we saw some Ukrainian forces in a firefight further south. And so, here's the video.
Это не по нам. Так вот они в лоб заходят.
Also, a huge shout out to EOTech, which provided him with the ACOG, I believe it is, that will help him to...
Holographic sight.
The holographic sight. I don't know much about sights and scopes, but provided him with a sight that will help him to aim at the Russians a little bit more truer. And so, here's the video. Now see him firing at the Russians. He said they were coming headlong onto them. We now see one of them asking for their turn on the machine gun.
It's very excited.
We now see the man get the 50, and now he's unloading onto the tree line with a 50 caliber. We now hear them all cheering.
Через поле что они?
We hear fire continuing around them. Hear a firework fly over, or something else. Hear another one fly over. Hear some bullets bouncing off the ground around them. Hear the fire coming in hot and heavy, but the Ukrainians don't really seem too phased about it.
Это я. Что это? Да ясно.
Рот наш чи не?
А хуй знает.
Да если не наш, давайте сбивать их.
Hey, how do you like that? They're like, is that drone arrows? They're like, I don't know. Well, let's just take it down just in case. They're like, we're not taking chances, man. Hear them continuing to fire at the Russians. There's some more rounds flying over. And with that, that's the end of the video, but once again, pretty interesting to see the Ukrainians fighting here in the Donetsk region. And while they were fighting here, we don't have any indication that the Russians are making any kind of massive push. It appears to maybe be a probing attack on those parts of the Ukrainian lines. However, moving a little bit further south, we do have an interesting look at an APC being destroyed in the area of Lazove. And so here's that video before we get down to a really interesting segment of videos that we'll show here in a second. We hear some nice music playing in the background. Always like some good music. And we can see the bomblet on its way, hitting the BTR.
Did you see they had the Ukraine colors on that bomblet?
I didn't, actually. Let me go back and look at that again. Let's see here. Oh, yeah, look, they do.
That's nice. What a nice touch.
That's nice. I'm sure the Russians love to see blue and yellow as the last thing on Earth. When you see it hit the BTR, it doesn't look like there was any significant damage. Maybe chip the paint a little. I think they're trying to go for a hole-in-one here. We now see it getting a little bit closer to being a hole-in-one. Small amount of smoke coming off the BTR. Now dropping the third one. This time hitting almost directly on top of the turret. And now we can see sometime in between that bomblet and this clip, the BTR is now lost a tire, it's on fire, and the doors are wide open on the side. So something happened. They apparently hit a hole-in-one or called in a mortar that hit this thing. We're not exactly sure, but it is now ablaze, and it has been destroyed. And so with that, that's the end of the video, and it's nice to see that the Ukrainians were able to get another BTR-80. We're now going to be moving a little bit further south on the front lines, where we have seen that apparently the Russians have created a small push in the area of Yekharivka and Volhodar, which has led to a very precarious but a very inspiring and heroic, I guess you could say, instance of some Ukrainian soldiers. I wanted to show this video because from what we know, it's about 2 days old at this point, but I thought it was an incredibly important one to show, and it also shows how heroic and how brave Ukrainian soldiers are on their part of the front lines. The video I'm about to show y'all is from 5 men. These 5 men all share a small trench work in the middle of a tree line somewhere in this area. They, of course, stated that in the video. These 5 men have been entirely surrounded by the Russians at the point that this video, the first one I showed y'all, was made. And they are about to tell y'all their thoughts, their comments, and what they're going to do because of that. I'm not going to say much more. These two videos are both about the stand of the 5 men in the tree line of, I guess the closest town would be Yekharivka. And so with that, here's the video. I'm going to let y'all see the subtitles and just hear them and what their thoughts and comments are.
Так, братва. Братаны, наш последний бой, он главный самый, да? Напиздували пидорасам. Сука, аж плакать хочется, блядь, якщо чесно, блядь.
А все нормально. Будем живы, не помрем.
Кругова оборона. Кругова оборона. З усіх сторон підараси. 4, блядь, бойця, нахуй. 5. 5, верніше, блядь. Крошу. Вчора от бали, еліту Росії кришили вчора. І сьогодні. Стоїм до кінця. У мене ще є, блядь, за 1000 патрон, блядь. Це на спальні. Дивіться, українці, це відео і пам'ятайте, хто тут стоїть.
Вільовий переглядаєш?
І як ми стоїмо.
Рівно, можливо.
Покажу свою крайню позицію. Сьогодні 1 листопада. Я всіх дуже люблю вас. Ой, мої рідненькі. Який гарний день. Там наші пацани відрізані, а там підараси вже їбашать з усіх стволів. Тільки що прилетіли по нас гради. АГС. Піхота наступає. Цілий день, 2 дня подряд. Ми в такому мінусі знаходимося. Коло Єгорок, якщо ви знаєте, де це. Павловка вже взята, 72-га бригада отошла. Фланга в нас немає. Нас криють безбожно. Я не знаю, що сказати вам. Цініть кожен свій день. Кожну хвилину свого життя цініть. І пам'ятайте, за що ми тут стоїмо. 8-й місяць. В холоді, не скажу, що в голоді, в окопах з мишми, з комарями, з мухами, з черв'яками, з підарасами, які насипають регулярно. Але ми стоїмо. Ми стоїмо. Без ротацій, без отпусків, без нічого. По 20 днів у місяці на нолі. По 20 днів, по 22, зараз вже більше виходить, бо нема міняти людей, у нас вже рота вся розбита, 300, 200, я не знаю, як ми ще тут держимося, але держимося. Не буду розводити паніку, сльози, ми патріоти, ми красавчики. По 15 коробів відстрілюємо за день. Передай привіт дітям. Що?
Ребята, до нас танчик пиздує.
До нас танчик іде, да? Вау! Тепер уже і танчик пиздує.
Спостерігаю за танком.
Ой.
Змій, спостерігаю за танком.
Оце головний кулеметчик, он. Косить підарасов.
Я їх так люблю, що аж, блядь, срати хочу. Підараси вони, суки, блядь.
Ми вже отак стоїмо назад, тому що там уже заходять. Обходять кругом. Все. Все. Отакі. Трансляцію Камбриг каже, смотрите чи ні? Підарас.
Well, that's the end of that video, and I'm now going to show you all the second clip, which shows just moments later they got engaged in a heavy firefight with Russian forces in the distance.
Пидоры, сука! Пошли нахуй с моей посадки, пидоры, сука! Прикольно ответ.
А?
На нахуй.
Пулемет не хотите забрать?
Так и там стоит.
Попался куда-то? Может, куда-то попался?
Может, и попал. Сука, а?
Снайпер, блин. Проснулся снайпер, откуда не знаю, падла.
Пидор.
Так, Бормуш.
Я тут.
Нифига себе проснулись.
Ну, а я говорил.
Согласен. Ты ёб твою мать! Вот это пизда была!
Ого.
Где он, падла, этот снайпер? Аргон, Аргон. Нет, я дальше бьет, он прямо над нами пиздует. Снайпера бьет оттуда. Аргон,
Я знаю, тут с 3 сторон идут огонь. Сейчас будет бам. Это не по нам. Так вот они в лоб заходят.
And real quick, everyone, I actually just realized that we showed this part of the video here forward just a second ago in Donetsk, but from what I was able to tell, this video and the last one are actually the same. So I'm going to allow this video to continue on, and then we'll round out their story here in a second.
Даю. С пулемета чи що?
ну конечно.
Через поле чи що они? Со спина.
Молодец.
А
что масики нахуй? Масики не знаю. Что, давай ебани уже. Блядь, ПГ. Так, сука. В этом-то и проблема. Надо было сопроводить. Что сказали, то взял,
Это я. Что это? Это я, нормально.
А что, рот наш, чи не?
А хуй знает.
А если не наш, давайте сбивать их. Наш, наверное, блядь, вот.
А,
Now with that, that's the end of the video. And now it's time to round out these soldier stories. The 5 men were able to hold the line through that video and beyond it. However, it appeared that the situation was worsening as Russian forces were now closing on in their position a little bit more and more with each passing hour. By great fortune and luck, somehow the Ukrainian forces were able to manage to roll forward an armored unit supported by the artillery, which then pushed the Russian forces back long enough that they were able to retrieve the 5 men and relieve their position. However, one can never go without stating that these soldiers were willing to lay down their lives and fight until the very last man and the last bullet in that position to defend that dugout and buy the rest of the Ukrainian lines some time. And one thing that can never be stated more than anything else is that the Ukrainian forces, much like they were at the very first month of the war, 8.5 months in, are willing to die, willing to lay down their own lives in a heroic defense of a small trench in the middle of a tree line in the middle of nowhere in Ukraine to make sure that the Russians will not take any more ground and not a single Ukrainian will ever fall into Russian hands again. And it's incredibly inspiring and incredibly heroic to see something like that, and to see these soldiers decide that instead of surrendering, they would hold their ground instead. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from those brave soldiers and their incredible story, and we're now going to be moving into the village of Yekharivka itself, where we saw that a Russian tank, probably one of the ones that was involved in the push on that dugout, being destroyed by artillery by the 71st Brigade, which came in to support the area and push the Russians back a little bit more, thwarting their offensive. When you see the artillery coming in on the tank, and the first shot is a dead-on hit, causing the tank's engine bay to set alight. Well, you now see the tank smoking and churning, and of course, this may be one of the moments that the Russian forces started to get pushed back. And this may be a clip of one of the tanks that may have been firing at their position, or one of the ones that was rolling forward, getting obliterated by the 71st, which came to the rescue of those 5 men. With that, we're now going to be moving on even further down the lines in the southern front into the area of Rykov, where we saw a very lucky Russian soldier. We don't see soldiers this lucky, but this guy won the lottery right here. So, here's the clip. So the bomblet's on its way, and it falls right behind him, and it doesn't blow up. So he just grabs it, and he just flings it down the trench like, I'm done with this. Oh, Lord. This right here is like cartoon levels of hilarity, because it falls behind him and it doesn't explode, and he's so tired of living in squalor in some muddy little ditch on the side of a road and having a bomblet fall on him and nearly kill him. He just flings it like, damn it, I'm done. Let's watch that.
I guarantee you, like, right after that happened, he called 1-800-SURRENDER.
Yes, look at him. He's like, dang it, I'm done. That's it. And he gets up and he's like, that's it, screw it. And he just starts running off. We now see a ghetto bomb get dropped. We now see him fling it. Whoa. That. Wait a minute. Did this goofball. Did this dingus just run down the trench like 100 yards and then go to sleep again? Well, I guess I won't get an answer on that, but let's watch that happen again.
I thought we were going to watch it and see.
The grenade falls on him, and he grabs it and he throws it, and then it blows up just several feet away from him. So now he's just sitting
still all right, though.
Now he's just sitting there still. Another bomblet's dropped, explodes near him. And now he's just laying there. We don't know if he's napping or what, but that's the end of the video. And I gotta say, that first one was real lucky on that guy's end. That thing fell right on him. We don't see bomblets fail often, but that's gotta be one of the funniest bomblet fails that we have ever seen, is that this guy literally just falling like, forget it. Let's just watch that one more time. The indignant flick. He's just like, yeah, whatever. He's like, I'm gonna leave now. But with that, that's the end of the clip. And it looks...
I see a lot of folks saying that the guy's actually already injured. There may be blood under his arm. I didn't really see that in the video, but maybe it was the case.
Well, I never really saw that in the video. And of course, we can't really ever comment on those things for certain reasons. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on down the line from the southern front. And while we've seen some very interesting events happen here, large frontline changes are not occurring. Apparently, there's some small frontline shifts in the area of Yekharivka, but it appears to largely be a back and forth in between the Russians and the Ukrainians, as the Russians push forward a little, and then the Ukrainians push them back immediately afterwards, much like we saw with the Battle of the 5 Men. Moving on, while I sit here and destroy my throat for some reason trying to inhale, which I don't understand, we're now going to be moving into the Kherson area, where on day 255, we saw that the Ukrainians were able to effectively destroy an AA system. So specifically a Tunguska and a Pantsir, both of them costing in the tens of millions. We can hear some music playing and swelling, and with it we can see what appears to be a Pantsir. Matthew, you want to see a magic trick?
Yeah.
I'm going to make this panzer disappear. And it's gone. You want to see another magic trick?
Oh.
That one was hit dead on.
That was like a weird effect on the video for a minute. It looked like the ground shifted.
It may have, and that was a Tunguski that got turned into a burnt Ruski. Well, you see another good picture of it there. And with that scene...
Man, they could use a brewski.
And they really could. I mean, like, the Tunguski...
I was trying to play into your rhyme there, but it was kind of late.
And the Tunguski getting turned into a burnt Ruski deserves a brewski. And so with that, we are now moving on into the next bit of news from the Kherson area, all the way across into the area of Barativka, where we saw that the Terra unit has been supporting the offensive with their drones. Also, some people are saying great Joker. I honestly thought it was terrible. But anyways, here's a video. Equipment is coming. Man, 2 units, 2 tanks. That almost sounds like an order at a fast food restaurant. We got an order on the fly, a hamburger with fries. And when you see the Terra unit really giving it to him. We can see that the Terra unit has also upgraded their intro. When you see the Russians maneuvering around, of course, moving is practically futile at this point, but we'll allow them a small moment to contemplate what they're doing. You can see the Terra unit can see every single Russian unit that's in this village so far. The tanks, the APCs, the infantry. Really everything here has been seen, so the Ukrainians have got a pretty good knowledge heading into this battle of what exactly they're going up against. Also, Jethro Bradley said this is an old clip, and I've kind of got to agree with you. It does seem like it may be old, so real quick, let me go through. Let me see if I see anything that's recognizable. Wait a minute. This is that old video where we saw the Ukrainians advancing on the village, and we actually saw the Russians literally just pick up and start running out of it. Like, you know, they just turned around and were running away in large numbers. So, you are correct, actually. Sorry about that. Jethro, you are correct. This is an old clip, so we're actually going to move on beyond this one, but if y'all want to see it, although it is old and we've shown it on stream before, go to the link in the description below for the Day 256 map, and y'all should be able to find it. Moving on into the next clip, however, at Skidney, we saw a column of Western vehicles, including some British, I believe they're called Huskies, and some French Vabs. And I'm a huge fan of the Vab. I think they look cool.
The Huckies?
The Huckies.
Did it say Huckies or Huskies?
I believe Huskies. Also, Scooby-Dooby-Doo, where are you? And then we get back to the rest of the Western convoy. God, look at that! That's like 30 Vabs.
Dang.
Man, I gotta tell you.
Bro, Raggy.
Uh-oh, that was, let's not do that. like Zoink Scoop. Oh, I can't even do that either. That's just terrible. I wish we could play the Scooby-Doo song, because every time we see one of these, that's a Scooby-Doo van. But anyways, that's the end of the video, and it's always nice to see that the Western countries like Britain and France have provided a whole load of support to the Ukrainian armed forces, and hopefully they're using it to good effect. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the Kherson area, because while we've been getting some news here, and we know that the Russians are withdrawing from that side of the river, we have not seen any major activity here over the past 48 hours. However, in Mykolaiv, we have seen that the Ukrainians attempted to shoot down a missile with their air defenses. We see the air defenses firing off. And correction, they aren't going for a missile, they're actually going for a Shahed 136. You see the missile flying into the distance. And we can hear someone's Clash of Clans boot up. And with that, we cannot see the missile hit the Shahed, so we don't know whether it was effective or not, but we can see the Ukrainian air defenses are active in attempting to take down these Shaheds, which is good to know. And it's a pretty good assurance to know that the Ukrainians are doing everything in their power to try and stop civilians from becoming the unfortunate victims of another Russian suicide drone attack. And so with that, it is now time to go to the President of Ukraine's speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky and listen to his address here on day 256 of the war. And so without further ado, here is President Volodymyr Zelensky.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці. Провів сьогодні чергове засідання Ставки Верховного Головнокомандувача. Доволі тривали 3 години. Дуже детально проаналізували ситуацію на передовій, на усіх напрямках, на енергетичному фронті, ситуацію на кордонах. Доповідали головнокомандувач, командувачі, керівник розвідки, прем'єр-міністр, міністр оборони, керівник прикордонників. Знаємо, до чого готується ворог. Будемо відповідати і далі звільняти нашу землю. Також дуже детально проаналізували все, що стосується постачання силам оборони. Це техніка, боєприпаси, зв'язок, зимові речі. Окремо розглянули протидію ракетному і дроновому терору. Уже є доволі значні результати у цьому. Процент збиття став більше, але ще є над чим працювати. Ми маємо забезпечити повний захист українського неба і будемо робити для цього і далі усе можливе і неможливе. Найближчими тижнями очікую хороших новин щодо ППО і ПРО для України. До речі, сьогодні з'явилося повідомлення з Ірану від офіційних представників. Там вирішили визнати, що таки постачали дрони для російського терору. Але і в цьому визнанні вони збрехали. Ми щодобово збиваємо іранські дрони мінімум по 10 штук. А іранський режим стверджує, що нібито дав небагато і ще до початку повномасштабного вторгнення. Тільки протягом одного вчорашнього дня було знищено 11 шахедів. Ми точно знаємо, що іранські інструктори вчили російських терористів користуватися дронами. А в Тегерані про це взагалі мовчать. І якщо в Ірані і надалі брехатимуть про очевидне, то це означає, що світ докладатиме ще більше зусиль, щоб розслідувати терористичну співпрацю російського та іранського режимів і те, чим Росія платить Ірану за таке спільництво. Не буде такого в сучасному світі, щоб хтось з терористів чи їхніх спільників залишився непокараним. Ситуація на передовій за добу не зазнала суттєвих змін. Найбільша жорстокість окупантів, як і раніше, сконцентрована на Донеччині, але постійні бої тривають і на інших ділянках фронту. Це понад 1000 кілометрів ліній бойових зіткнень. Хочу сьогодні особливо відзначити нацгвардійців, які захищають нашу державу на Луганщині у складі Сил оборони, зокрема бійців 27-ї Печерської бригади Нацгвардії, які разом з підрозділами сухопутних військ дуже ефективно мінусують ворожу техніку і самих окупантів. Дякую вам, хлопці. Робимо все, щоб у вас та усіх інших наших воїнів було ще більше можливостей гнати ворога. І наступні тижні з цієї точки зору будуть дуже важливими, дуже тісно працюємо з партнерами, щоб отримати для України більше танків, більше броні, більше артилерії. Хочу відзначити і наших прикордонників, тих, хто продовжує укріплювати рубежі на Сумщині, Чернігівщині, на Харківщині, попри постійні російські обстріли і провокації. В деяких прикордонних районах нашої країни майже щоденно мінометний вогонь терористів, постійна загроза ракетних ударів. Я дякую, хлопці, за стійкість і витримку. Цього тижня вдалося забезпечити продовження роботи зернового коридору у Чорному морі. За підсумками 7 днів з портів Одеса, Чорноморськ та Південний вийшли 28 суден, які перевозять більше ніж 800 тисяч тонн агропродукції. Напрямки – Єгипет, Лівія, Марокко, Алжир, Оман, Туреччина, Китай, Ефіопія. Причому судно в Ефіопію зафрахтовано продовольчою програмою ООН. На борту 30 тисяч тонн пшениці. І це типовий перелік країн, які споживають більшу частину нашого аграрного експорту. Саме на прикладі експортної зернової ініціативи ми показали, що світ здатен гарантувати стабільність попри будь-які загрози, які створює Росія. Світ не піддався російському шантажу, ключові суб'єкти діяли рішуче, і як результат загострення продовольчої кризи вдалося уникнути. Це один з найбільш вагомих міжнародних результатів всієї осені. Коли світ об'єднаний, у терористів немає шансів. Ще один доказ сили від реального об'єднування світу – це робота нашої благодійної платформи United 24. Сьогодні рівно півроку після її запуску. Майже 220 мільйонів доларів внесків від мільйонів людей з більш ніж сотні країн. Для України купуються дрони, гелікоптери, машини для розмінування, в тому числі дуже ефективна армтрек, десятки швидкої, які вже працюють у прифронтових районах. До проєкту приєднались зіркові амбасадори Андрій Шевченко, Еліна Світоліна, Олександр Усик, Демна, Лів Шрайбер, Марк Геммел, Imagine Dragons, Барбара Стрейзанд, Скотт Келлі і Тімоті Снайдер. Я дякую кожному з донорів і амбасадорів United 24, команді проєкту та усім, хто допомагає нам захищатись від російського терору. І до речі, наступного тижня ми запускаємо ще один фандрайзинговий напрямок. Будемо акумулювати кошти для флоту морських дронів. Думаю, абсолютно кожен розуміє, що це і для чого це. І впевнений, що мільйони людей підтримують і такий напрямок в нашій обороні. Як це працює, всі вже бачать. І це тільки для захисту нашої морської акваторії. На чуже ми не претендуємо. Слава усім, хто воює і працює для України. Слава кожному нашому герою. Слава Україні!
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Zelensky here on day 256 of the news. And of course, I wish the best for Zelensky in terms of his mental health. Mental health is very hard to keep a good check on, especially when you're incredibly busy. And now it appears that he's imagining dragons, so we might want to keep an eye on him.
I'm trolling, by the way. I know who that is.
And of course, I'm trolling too. That's one of the few bands I know in the modern day. But of course, with that, that rounds out tonight's news segment. Of course, if you did enjoy tonight's news, please make sure to subscribe and also hit the like button. We've gotten 2,225 likes tonight, which is a pretty decent amount. But you know what could be better? More likes. Not a really definitive amount or anything, but more of them. Of course, it helps this channel to reach out to more people because YouTube looks at that number and they go, hey, wow, a lot of people who watch this channel really like what they watch. And so if they like it, we ought to show this to more people. And so that helps the Lee Spring Army to grow and helps us to continue to cover the war in Ukraine and helps us to deliver the news to more people. And so, of course, if you would like to help us do that, make sure to click that like button. And so with that, now that we've rounded out the news segment for the night, it's now time to get on into the question segment and to answer all of the super chats that have been sent in as well as all of the live chats. Now, real quick, Matthew, how many super chats do we have?
It looks like we have. Let me try to do this math in my head real quick. Let's see. Looks like 36.
Oh, nice. A pretty good number tonight. And so with that,
a nice round figure.
Nice round figure because you see 30. You said 36, correct?
Yes.
36 divided by 6 is 6. Very round. Very nice.
True.
And so with that, let's get to the first one.
All right. So we do have a couple of polls to address. And the first poll says, do you think the soldier was alone that jumped out of the woods and hit the tank? It looks like 64% said no, his unit was probably nearby. 22% said I don't know, and 14% said he was solo away from unit. Now me, I don't know. I asked that question out of genuine curiosity. So, Enforcer, what say you?
Soldiers never travel alone. They always have someone near them, of course. A lot of y'all veterans-wise, because I always hear everyone making fun of this term, a battle buddy. I really honestly, I don't understand the term battle buddy because I feel like pal or friend gets the same thing across, but you know, I guess it is what it is. Anyways, no soldier is ever alone because if he gets killed, how does anyone know? You know, he just gets killed. So there was someone else out there. We just didn't get to see him because they were probably inside the tree line. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well. Also, someone is probably about to say, well, snipers go alone. Snipers do not go alone. They go in pairs. There's usually a sniper and a spotter.
Although Schmedak went ahead and beat you to that one. He said even snipers never go alone.
And that's what I saw because I was like, he said that and I was like, that's good because someone's about to say, something like, oh, well, snipers go alone. No, they do not. If you've ever seen a story like, you know, I'm trying to think because I don't really know these stories all too well. Like, what was that guy?
Chris Kyle?
No, not Chris Kyle. It was the other guy who was in Afghanistan, you know, and he was the last one alive. And then later on, I think they figured out that he wasn't even telling the truth.
Marcus Luttrell?
I think so.
No, wait a minute. Marcus Luttrell was telling the truth, though. I don't think he was lying.
But who was the guy who had the movie made about him? And then later on, if they found out that there was no record of any of those events ever happening, and the whole
it was a sniper, but I don't remember his name.
Yeah, I forgot the name of the guy. There's a movie that was made about him. But even in that movie, I believe he was a part of a marksman team. They started off with 4 guys, which is kind of high for mark. Anyways, moving on from that, they never travel alone. If you hear about Chris Kyle, honestly, you ought to hear about Chris Kyle and his spotter, because the sniper and their spotter is a pair. They always go everywhere together. And so with that, I hope. Oh, Lone Survivor. That was the name of the movie. And so
everybody's saying Chris Kyle. I think it might have been Chris Kyle, but I don't know for certain.
Chris Kyle, that one, I remember that Chris Kyle was a big deal. Oh, well, Chris Kyle became a big deal when he died at that shooting range because he brought along that person who was a little unstable. But I think after he died, everyone started to figure out, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, the story didn't really add up, and dots started getting connected that weren't really there. And everyone's saying it's Chris Kyle, so I'm guessing, I don't know, I'll have to look into that one a little bit more, because I think some people are saying that it's Chris Kyle's story that was made up, or it was someone else's. I'm not sure, I don't know. Anyways, with that, we're now going to be moving on into the next question, because there was another guy out there with the anti-tank man.
All right, so we do have one more poll, and the second poll, and first up, folks, let's try to keep the comments as civil as possible. I know it's a little bit contentious, but the question was, did you hear that Ukraine lost connection to 1,300 Starlink satellites over a funding issue? This happened recently. It looks like 45% said yes, but I thought Musk was funding it, 20% said, I don't know, I've never heard, and 34% said, no, I haven't heard, that's bad. Now, on this, I have to say that even though if I was in Musk's position, I would go ahead and pay for it. It is the guy's money, and we really can't tell him how to spend it because, you know, it's America. But if it were me, I would probably go ahead and spend it because, you know, that's going to save lives, and what's more valuable than people's lives? But, Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say it's kind of weird that the Starlink system went down. And one thing that is important to remember is that if you say something, you've got to follow through on it. And so for him to say that they were going to fund it, it's kind of weird that they're going down due to a lack of funding. But then again, you know, while he said we're funding all of them, he probably meant 10% of them because, you know, Musk will sit there and say something like, oh, we're sending all the Starlinks over, and then 70% of them are bought by the federal government, and then another 50 to 60% of them are being still funded by the federal government. So, you know, don't really know the exact figures behind that, but still a little bit interesting nonetheless. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And also, I would have to ask on this one because whenever anything is brought up with a specific person's name that we're talking about right now, it always turns into a bloodbath in the chat, like Roman gladiator. Well, that's actually a myth, but kind of like a I don't even know how to explain it. It's terrible. It gets terrible in the live chat. It gets nasty down there. So I ask that y'all don't get too barbaric down there and just go all out nutty. So with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so moving into our super chat questions. Up first, we have a $100 donation, very generous, from Retail Mix USA, who's been around for a very long time, who does not leave a comment. But thank you so much for that support once again, and Enforcer has a few things to say.
And I got to thank you so much for the support, Retail Mix USA. I thank you so much for giving us all of the retail mix in the United States of America that we can ever possibly want. And of course, I thank you so much as well for the support to this channel. That support helps us to keep this thing running, and it's an incredibly high amount of support. And whenever someone sends in a high amount of support, I'm incredibly honored by that, and also I'm incredibly relieved. One, it helps us keep the lights on behind the scenes, and of course we greatly appreciate you for that. But also I'm highly honored that people send us that kind of support, because y'all find our channel that worthwhile. And I sometimes, well, most of the time really, I don't see how people find the channel that worthwhile, because, you know, I'm just doing the thing that I've always done my whole life, talking the same spiel that I talk to everyone, that usually throws people off, and they're like, yeah, he's a little bit too geeky, a little too nerdy. But I do thank you so much for the support, because it helps this channel to keep on running and helps me to be a geeky nerd like I am. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again, Retail Mix USA, for the support. And with that, on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat from Heather Fitzgibbon, who says, hello, we missed you, but the LSA knows you need an occasional break. Take a question from the chat, please. And Slava Ukraine, Hiram Slava, and Slava the Enforcer, and Enforcer Matt.
And thank you so much for the support. And of course, we do need a break every once in a while, but one thing I don't want to do is make breaks normal. While yesterday was a little bit of an exception, and it wasn't really a normal thing, it was really a one-off thing, I don't want to make breaks all too normal, because I don't really like the idea of that, you know, because, you know, then you get in a regular streaming schedule, and then it's every other day, and, you know, I want to make sure that y'all have something that y'all can watch that's reporting the news every single night, every single week, except for Mondays. That's one day that I did make an exception for a long time ago, but that was to make sure I didn't burn out too much, and even then it's a very fragile balance. But I do thank you so much once again for the support, and also being a Lee Spring Old Guard member. And with that, thank you so much once again. Probably won't take breaks. I know that everyone's gonna be like, man, you're gonna burn yourself out. No, yeah, maybe. I mean, like, honestly, not gonna lie, yeah, I probably am. But I'm still gonna keep going nonetheless. And so thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat from David Colley, who says, let's see here. Just checking the super chat real quick. He said, which U.S. early president does Zelensky remind you of? This war is so much like the American Revolution, a fight for freedom, defeating corruption and dignity. Slava Ukraine.
And thank you for the support. And if I had to relate him to an early American, it's a tough one. Because I really would see him as more relatable to more modern Americans than older Americans. But I'm trying to think of someone who would fit the bill back then. It's really tough. Man, I'm having a tough time thinking about it. I'm really drawing a blank there. If I had to go with someone from the Revolutionary era, I couldn't really come up with one off the top of my head. George Washington, not so much, because George Washington didn't have the same background as Zelensky. You know, of course, George Washington was I believe, a pretty wealthy planter in Virginia, and also had a decent military career behind him. And Zelensky, of course, was an actor and a comedian, so that's a little bit of a different mix there. Of course, George Washington, before he became president, was a general of the Continental Army, which is a little bit different than Zelensky. So I couldn't really see him similar in that regard. And also, one second, I'm sorry, for some reason my throat is really getting, like, congested tonight for some reason, but I don't really see him similar to George Washington. Going through all the others, I can't really find the similarity. But if I had to relate him to anyone...
What about Eisenhower? Is he considered an early president?
Early, not quite. He's more of a modern president because he was around in the 50s. I consider everything beyond 1880 to be modern, and everything beyond that to be, I guess you could say, middle age. Everything from 1880 to about 1830, and then everything before that's old. So, man, I'm having a hard time.
Well, I got to say that if we're talking like more modern, I would probably say Eisenhower if it were me.
Eisenhower, kind of. I can kind of see that. I was honestly thinking more so Teddy Roosevelt, because Teddy Roosevelt still had a military career before becoming a president, but he didn't really have all too much of one. He just kind of went around and did whatever. But still, I could kind of see him being similar to Teddy Roosevelt, or I can't really see a modern American president, okay? Because a lot of modern American presidents, equal strike against all of them, never touch anything close to a battlefield or get close to it. And of course, I'm not saying that doesn't mean that they don't have any military experience or anything, but once they become president or get around the political sphere, they never really get anywhere where there would be danger, like from the 50s onwards. So, I mean, I can't really see a modern president. Someone said FDR. I would have to say, honestly, the closest thing I could think of is FDR or Teddy Roosevelt. Both of them are Roosevelts. But That would be my opinion. I would think he'd be pretty close to one of the Roosevelts, either FDR or Teddy. And so with that, I hope that does address the question fairly well. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
All right, and up next we have a £20 donation from the viewer from the UK, Phil Tatham, who I think's already gotten off for the night, but he said, another from the chat, please, gents, and Slava Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the support, Phil Tatham, one of our favorite British viewers, and of course, we are going to make sure to answer a live chat in your honor. And so with that, what do we got?
All right, and the question goes to, let's see here, Alan Cannon, who says, are the explosives used by the drones similar to the modern safety explosives used in construction and mining?
That is an excellent question, and that's way out of my league to answer. Unfortunately, I don't know the kind of explosive fillers that are being used in these drone bombs that are exploding on top of these tanks and also being used on the kamikaze ones, but I have a feeling that it's certainly possible that it could be, but I'm not incredibly sure. Also, real quick, before we move on from that live chat, just to address something else, someone said Bush served, didn't he? Yes, George Bush, both the father and the son did serve. The father actually served in the Second World War and suffered a serious head injury when bailing out of a TBF Avenger that had been shot down. He hit the back of his head, I believe, on the elevator, which left him with a severe concussion, and then I believe he was taken prisoner, or he was recovered from the sea by the U.S. Navy. I'm not exactly sure the details of that story after he suffered the head injury, but his son also served, I believe, in the U.S. Air Force. I forgot for the pilot of which aircraft, but what I mean by me saying that modern presidents don't really get in the line of danger is that you don't really see any of them pulling a Churchillian move where they sit there and go to the front lines and they come under fire or anything similar to that, or really putting themselves in the harm's way of going, you know, I'm going to stay in 10 Downing Street in London while the Blitz is happening. You don't see that in modern American presidents. There's really not an opportunity for most of them to do that anyways, but when there is, like, for example, with Iraq, you know, like, if one thing I would say is kind of putting yourself in the line of danger is to fly over there to Saudi Arabia, go to the front line, well, I guess you could say go very close to the border of Iraq to the U.S. troops, review them, and then they go on their way, or something similar like that. You don't see that. And it doesn't happen anymore with modern American presidents. Really, because we've bubble wrapped them so much. We really don't let presidents get anywhere that even has a semblance of danger anymore. That's usually a security issue. But still, at the same time, I kind of wish that there was a less, and I don't know if you agree with this, Matthew, because this is kind of my opinion. I wish there was a less of a focus on the governmental level on safety and more so on impact, you know, of like what's going on, because it would be a lot better, for example, on 9/11, if, I guess you could say, as a sign of strength, that the current president at that point stayed in the White House instead of getting on Air Force One and then orbiting the United States for days on end.
Although I think when that happened, I think he was down in Florida in a school. Then he jumped on the plane to head up to D.C., and then the people around him, his chief of staff, decided they would not let him land at the White House, or excuse me, not at the White House, at Andrews Air Force Base.
And you know, it wasn't really his decision, but still, it was a stupid idea from everyone else to send such an image that doing something to the United States, you can literally keep the president of the United States in an aircraft for nearly, what was it, 2 or 3 days?
I don't think they kept him in there for 2 or 3 days, but I think he landed at Andrews. I don't really know the exact time. I think it was a few hours after it happened, after they finally got over the initial shock and understood what was happening. And then he went to a bunker somewhere. I'm not really sure.
I mean, I gotta be honest, I don't really like that idea, because if you're going to be a president, this is one thing that a lot of people complain about nowadays, is that politicians will always decide to send people to war, but they never get close to it themselves. If you believe in something, you ought to be getting close to it. Like, for example, if you're starting a war, you ought to go over there at some point to the location that your soldiers are fighting at and review them, or hand out medals or something similar. You ought to do something like that, because it shows, I guess you could say, your support for what the government is actually doing, instead of, you know, hiding in the White House or a bunker, kind of like Putin is doing, and go get them, guys, because it never really looks good. You are correct. War should never happen, but it will, and it does. And whenever it does, you always should be there with the guys you're sending over. That used to be a normal precedent before weapons became so advanced that you could hit a flea from 25 miles away, but nowadays I still feel like that ought to happen, because it just shows support, and it shows a good image to the public that you're actually behind what you're sending them off to do. And so with that, I hope that does address the little aside there for a second. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from SuperBunker9000, NAFO, who says, hope you guys get some rest. Please don't hesitate to take a break once in a while. You both deserve it. Oklahoma stinks. Mo. Chat question, please.
And thank you so much for the support. And
wait a minute, was that supposed to be moo or mo?
I'm not really... Reread the whole thing again real quick for me.
Hope you guys got some rest. Please don't hesitate to take a break once in a while. Oklahoma stinks, either moo or mo. And chat question, please.
And thank you so much once again for the support. I don't know if that's supposed to be moo or mo. I don't know. But thank you so much once again. I don't want to take rests often. Yesterday was a real big exception. So it's really to me, I don't want to take breaks. Yesterday I had to take one. It wasn't really anything I wanted to do. But with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, and also helping us to keep this channel running. And no, Oklahoma doesn't stink. You're going to get psyops on your case. He's going to be on you like a white on rye. But thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one. Also, Douglas Nyquist said, the Enforcer, I hope you don't want photo ops. Well, photo ops just kind of come with being a politician. You always have to do photo ops, but I feel like not everything... Well, in the modern world, everything's got to end up being a photo op. That's kind of the lame reality of it. It's kind of dumb. But anyways, I wouldn't really want to do a lot of them. Photo ops aren't really a big deal of mine. But, if you want to keep in the public's attention and let them know that you are doing something, you have to do photo ops, or else, some guy who's wanting your position is going to come out of nowhere and go, look, he hasn't done anything. And then you go, yeah, I have. And then there's no proof of it. So with that, we are on to the next one.
Oh. And also, real quick, I saw a viewer, Michael Mervash, say that no one can order the president to do anything. They can advise, but not order. But actually, in theory, that's true. But in actuality, like on 9/11, like we were mentioning, Bush was actually overridden by his chief of staff and the people around him, and they refused to let him go back to the White House under any circumstances. So, in theory, it's supposed to be that way, but not really, because if enough people around the president decide to defy him, he really doesn't have any alternatives. Enforcer, do you want to add anything?
I think he would have some alternatives. I just think he didn't want to start rocking the nation's leadership so much. He could have just started immediately removing people from their positions in the executive branch and replacing them with other people immediately. But I'm sure.
Well, not while he's on the plane.
Yeah, I'm sure he didn't want to do that, because that would start throwing massive wrenches into the system. How everything's running, and something horrendous just happened. So they don't want to start having leadership changes right then. But still, I didn't like the idea of that decision, because when you hear it, it almost sounds like it almost sounds like cowardice. It's like, no, we can't get in the line of danger along with the common people. We've got to stay up here in Air Force One where no one can touch us. It's really removing yourself from the situation from just I guess you could say, a philosophical perspective. It's like, all the other civilians in the United States, they can get screwed, but not me. I'm going to be up here. And, of course, that
although at the time, they really weren't sure what was happening. They weren't sure if, maybe we were under attack from a foreign power. Nobody was really sure at the time, so they were just taking precautions, I think.
Yeah, but, it's like, at the same time, Zelensky could have taken a precaution by flying out of the country in the first week of the war, and that wouldn't have looked all too well, and that would have led to Ukraine's collapse. Of course, later on, not getting into this too much, the president at the time did have a great shining moment when he was at Ground Zero, and he said, and I hear you, and they had that whole thing. That was a pretty good moment. That was one of the uniting moments in the country on that specific instance, but I feel like it would have been a lot better if he had gone to the White House and he had made an address saying, I'm in the White House, I'm here with you all, we're going to figure this thing out and stick it through, instead of being on Air Force One and just kind of out there somewhere, he's in the air, we don't know where, but he's with us, it kind of sounds weird, it kind of feels weird, but anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, Super Bunker did ask for a live chat question. So it goes to, let's see here, Joe Thompson, who says, are the Ukrainians paying the Russians who voluntarily surrender?
Are the Ukrainians paying the Russians to voluntarily surrender? I don't think they're paying them, but they are offering them a way out. I guess that is payment in a way. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from David Colley, who says, I was thinking of a Madison. Great stream, guys.
And thank you so much once again for the support. And he was thinking about James Madison?
I believe so.
I guess that would be similar. If I remember correctly, James Madison was the only president to come under fire at the Battle of Bladensburg in 1814. I may be getting that wrong, though.
I think Ronald Reagan also came under fire, too, at some point.
Well, gee, Matthew, I think a lot of them came under fire under that. Miss me. So with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Classified Veteran, who says, about last week, I shared my barrage balloon idea with you. I emailed them with your net variation included. A representative in Ministry of Defense of Ukraine said they'd send it up the chain. Skynets could be airborne soon.
And thank you for the support. Can you tell me what that means, Matthew? Because I think I may be missing some of the lingo there because I can't really read it.
He's saying that he sent you some email with a barrage balloon idea. I emailed them. I'm assuming he emailed the Ukrainians the idea, and they said that I'm not really sure, to be totally honest with you.
Unfortunately, I can't see the email. If it was sent in, I don't have it. But with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the question fairly well. And I do remember us talking about a drone net idea, but I will try and see if I can find that email, but I can't see it right now. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
All right. And up next, we have a $20 super chat, excuse me, from Rotormax, who says, great reporting, guys, and hats off to the Ukrainians holding off the Russians in the trench.
Can you reread that one again? Because once I was looking at the live chat there and someone was saying something, but with that, can you reread that again?
Rotormax said, great reporting, guys, and hats off to the Ukrainians for holding off the Russians in that trench.
And thank you so much for the support. And of course, thank you for enjoying this channel and what we do. We try our best to make sure that the war can be covered each and every day as accurately as we can. And also huge kudos to the 5 men in that trench. They fought like hell and they were determined to hold their ground. And that takes a lot of courage, knowing that the odds are completely stacked against you and none of the chips are in your favor. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from William Allen, who says, W. Bush was the first enlisted airman to become president. He went through basic at Lackland and then received lieutenant bars in the Texas A&G. He flew F-102 Delta Daggers, also served in Alabama A&G in Montgomery. And did he? I didn't know that.
Really? I didn't know that. That's also really cool. Also, Matthew, do you know what a Delta Dagger is?
I don't.
This thing is cool. It's shaped literally like a dart, pretty much. I think the F-106 is called the dart, but this thing is pretty wild looking. Something that a lot of people don't know.
That is wild.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that the Air Force used to have these things, and if I'm correct, and hopefully William can back me up on this, this thing is an interceptor, but I'm not exactly sure on that. I like the F-106, I believe is the one I'm thinking about. Yeah, it's like kind of like, I guess you could say, I don't really want to call it an improvement, but I guess you could call it an improvement of the F-102. I think it looks a little bit better. It looks a lot like a Mirage in some ways, not in others, but still really cool series of aircraft, or the Delta Wing ones that the U.S. made for a little bit. And so with that, thank you so much for the support, William Allen, and also sharing a really interesting story about, I guess you could say, George Bush's, the younger's, legacy before he became president, because that is really interesting to hear that he flew in the Alabama Air National Guard. That is actually pretty cool. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Junebug72, who says, hello, and please pass this question in the chat. Take good care, you two, and Slava Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the support. We are trying to take as good of care as we can, but of course the war keeps going, and with it, we have to keep going too. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and let's hear that live chat, Matthew.
And the live chat question goes to Mad Machine, who says, Enforcer, after Ukraine wins the war, will the government rebuild and require new buildings to have fallout and bomb shelters?
Most likely not. That's usually kind of a secondary, I guess you could say, thought or a requirement. The Ukrainians will most likely be hoping and expecting that they will not have to go into this war, into a war again anytime soon. They most likely will not have to. So I don't think they would, but still they may. That's actually a pretty decent suggestion. If I've ever heard of a better one, that would be it. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Blue Flam 777, who says, what Olympic sport will Ukraine always beat Putin in? It'll be the javelin throw.
Oh, and they probably will. I wonder if they do in real life. Javelin throw, summer. Let's see. Javelin throw, the Summer Olympics schedule and results. Let's see. Men's javelin throw results. Let's go through here. All right. So, yes, I am happy because it's the Olympics. So what in the world can
they want you to say you're happy about receiving cookies?
Yeah, I'm real happy about cookies, fellas. So let's see here. Belarus got on the chart twice.
Ugh.
The Czechs got second and third, silver and bronze. An Indian got gold. Usually the United States is the one that just dominates everything. So it's really interesting to see some of the smaller countries, I guess you could say in terms of Olympic prowess, like the Czech Republic and India, getting on up there in something that's really interesting. But we don't get to see any of the other ones. Dang it. Where in the world did they go? Like, that's dumb. We can't see everyone else below number 12. So apparently the Ukrainians and the Russians were down there somewhere, but neither of them placed. But anyways, with that, I hope that addresses the comment fairly well. And also, I like that joke too. That was a pretty good one. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, don't forget, folks, I was just reminded by Richard in the live chat that we actually go back an hour tonight. I think at midnight we go back an hour. So in a minute, it's about to be 11 again. So I keep forgetting if that means it's going to get lighter in the morning or darker in the morning earlier. I'm not really sure, but somebody let me know in the live chat. But anyways, we get an extra hour of sleep. That's what I was trying to get to.
Oh, real quick,
Yes.
I can't say that as a presidential policy. If y'all vote for me for president in 2040, if it hasn't been eliminated yet, I'm going to eliminate on a federal level daylight savings time because it is a obsolete and dated system that's no longer needed in this country, and it's just causing a whole bunch of headache and ridiculousness on 2 days of the year. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from White Lightning 777, who says, if you put a toilet on top of a landmine in Ukraine to catch orcs, is that hunting over bait? Also, hello from Baltimore, Maryland, home of Nick's Fish House.
Oh, that was a pretty good one. Oh man, read that joke off again, man. That was a freaking golden one.
He says, if you put a toilet on top of a landmine in Ukraine to catch orcs, is that hunting over bait?
That's gold. That one is great. And of course, that would be true. They would be hunting over bait. Luckily, they don't have game wardens in Ukraine, or the game wardens are currently fighting on the front. But let's drop down in Baltimore in a couple of places, and let's see what it looks like, specifically in Riverside, because Fort McHenry is right down here. So let's drop here. Got a nice little park. Got a nice little...
Looks like maybe an old Alabama town a little bit.
It kind of does, doesn't it? Fun fact, did y'all know... Did y'all know that?
Weird.
Did y'all know that Baltimore, Maryland, was the first city in the world to have its own municipal gas works?
Interesting.
Yeah, so they were the first. They were the first city ever that could have gas stoves that operated inside of their houses that were connected to a main. That is
weird.
Yeah, that's actually really cool. Let's get closer to Fort McHenry and see what it looks like down here. Oh, it actually looks kind of nice. This is what you would imagine like I guess you could say like an old style middle colony city to kind of look like, you know, in a way. Really interesting. And now it's time to go into downtown. What does downtown look like? In old Baltimore. Alright, so you got graffiti, kind of normal. Honestly, kind of looks like Birmingham.
Yeah, it really does. I'll be honest with you. That downtown right there is not much better than here, like in Birmingham.
Oh, look, the Blitz. Where'd the buildings go? Like this spot here. I want to know what happened to the buildings in the spot because it looks like they were demolished and they just left it as a lot. That's kind of interesting. But anyways, let's go all the way out here. What does this look like in Garin Oaks? So this is not that bad. This is actually quite nice. The road could use a new layer, but that's just side complaint. Kind of reminds me of our hometown, Matthew, if you know what I'm talking about.
No, not really.
Well, I think it
this looks nicer.
Honestly, yeah, it kind of does look nicer, but I was still trying to give our hometown a little bit of a home field advantage.
Our hometown didn't have any nice green sod like that in the front yard.
Well, I mean, yeah, you're kind of right. Also, look at all the industrial stuff on this little peninsula here. Like, the Coast Guard yard. Oh, that rhymes. They got a little Coast Guard cutter. They got a couple of boats. Pretty cool all around.
I'm seeing a lot of people griping about how this place is run, so apparently it's not very popular.
No, everyone, one thing I found out is that every city, and of course, I'm sure if you live there, you know the details, but every city's got its good parts and its bad parts. I'm always just interested in where a lot of y'all live because it's always cool to get a moment to take a look at it. But it is what it is for y'all. I'm sure a lot of y'all who live in the city know of stuff in there that's not right. Like here in Birmingham, because Birmingham isn't without fault. Everyone knows that the Birmingham Waterworks is like some kind of a weird, like, what is it, like a slush fund kind of thing? It went bankrupt years ago.
It's corrupt as hell, to say the least.
Yeah, so every city's got its problems. Every city's got its pluses. So I'm sure you've got some pretty valid complaints about Baltimore too, because nothing's perfect. Everything's got its flaws and everything's got its positives. But with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support and letting us look at your hometown of Baltimore.
All right, so moving on to our next one, we have a very generous $100 donation from Rasmus Westholm, who says, Matt and Enforcer, this is for your I Need X fund. And guys, take a break if you need one. No shout out needed. You are doing great coverage. And guess what, Rasmus? We had to shout you out anyway, and thank you very much for that support.
Rasmus, it is our policy on this channel. It's not really a policy. What am I talking about? We're not a company. It is a dedication that we have to make sure that every single time anyone supports this channel, if the support can be as small as $1, we will always call out everyone who supports this channel because we want you all to know that we truly do appreciate the support y'all are giving. Like with everything involved in this channel, 4,900 of y'all are here right now, and 4,900 of y'all could choose to do whatever with y'all's time that y'all want. Y'all could go and watch Netflix. Y'all could go and watch anything you want. You could be out with family, out eating. Instead, y'all have chosen to get on this channel, and for that, I'm more than proud to think that y'all find this something worthwhile and something worth watching, and that also extends to the support. Y'all can do anything y'all want. Y'all could go. So y'all could go support anyone. Y'all could go do anything. And yet y'all have decided to support this channel and help me to keep running. And for that reason, we always want to say thanks to all of y'all because it truly does mean a lot to us that y'all support us and help us to keep this thing running. Because, of course, y'all could do anything y'all wanted to, yet y'all have chosen to help us to keep running and help to keep the lights on. And so with that, thank you so much once again, Rasmus. But I'm determined there will be very little breaks. View me as a Victorian-era factory floor manager, and also at the same time, the poor, pitiful soul working on the factory floor. The manager inside my head will not let me have a break, and the little worker man is getting tired, but he has to keep going. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again, Rasmus, for the support.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Wendy, who says, thanks to you and Matt for the work you do. Pass my question to the live chat if you don't mind.
And thank you so much for the support, and thank you so much for enjoying this channel as well. And we will make sure to answer a live chat in your honor. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and the question goes to Alan McLeod, who says, Enforcer, how would you and everyone else feel if NATO, including the U.S., put boots on the ground in Ukraine right now?
I would be a little bit mixed about that, honestly, because I don't think that we've reached the requirements for us to get involved yet. But at the same time, I could kind of see the reasons why, although that would start the inevitable ticking of the time bomb that would be a nuclear exchange with Russia, because World War III would break out literally within days or hours afterwards. But still, I thank you so much for the support. That's kind of what I'm looking at right now, but I could be wrong. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and thank you so much for helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from John Williams, who says, just to say hi from Talgreth, Wales. Take someone else's question.
Talgreth, Wales. How do you spell that, Matthew?
Talgrth.
Grth. Talgarth. Can you respell
Well,
that?
there's no O.
Can you just respell that whole thing for me real quick?
You actually had it. That was it.
But there was nothing that pulled up.
He might have misspelled it. It might be Talgarth.
Let's see if we find... Oh crap, Matthew, we've been here before.
Wait a minute. Let me look. Let's see.
Remember
what's the closest town?
Newport. And then we
go up. Glassberry and let's see. Yeah, I think we might have been here. Yeah, I saw that. I know. I was about to read that off too. I was like,
I wonder how that town got its name.
It's probably a reference to the roosters.
Well, sometimes you'd never know. I mean, like, sometimes it is what you think it is. Not often, though, but I have seen that every once in a while. Anyways, I believe this is in the, what is the name of that river, Matthew, that we were on before with the, man, I'm trying to think of it all. It's all, let me see.
The River Kwai.
No, not the River Kwai, Matthew. Jeez, it's the River Wye. Let's see, you go up the River Wye. We were in Monmouth. Okay, yeah. Now it's all coming back to me. We were in Monmouth. This gas station right here. Wait, no. Wait. Yeah. It was this one. It was the Shell. Remember, Matthew? Camel Balls.
Oh yes, I remember it.
Yeah, we went. Okay, so real quick, everyone. Real quick, fun story before we go over there to Talgarth. This gas station here, we had to pull over to get gas for the rental car with. And when we went in the gas station, in this very one, they had this novelty candy called Camel Balls. It was the funniest thing we had ever seen. We were busting out laughing about that in the gas station, driving out of Wales, and then we drove down to, I believe, Newport. And we stayed the night there, and then we immediately went to Bath right afterwards. But still, it was a really cool place. Now let's move on, now that we've gone down a trip down memory lane, up here to, let's see, Talgarth in the UK, which has got some really nice pictures. And let's drop down and see what this looks like. The hedgerow. Yes, I remember these, Matthew. You remember, you would always be scared we'd run the car into the side of the hedgerow.
Yes.
We can also say, what's this? Road work? I bet you these are in Welsh, aren't they? Yeah, they are. See? It's in Welsh. That's really cool. But anyways, really nice place. I love Wales. I think Wales is a very beautiful place. Got beautiful landscape to it. It's the winter here, so it's not really making a great case for itself, but I promise y'all, if y'all aren't from Ukraine, aren't from Wales, in the summertime, this place is gorgeous. Oh, we've been through here, I think, once or twice. And it was just beautiful each time. Also, you can see little sheep on the hill, and that's really nice too. And so with that, we are on to the next one. But thank you so much once again for the support and letting us take a look at this at Talgarth in Wales. Also, wow, isn't that nice looking? Look, there's snow on the mountains and everything. This used to be an old castle. Not much left of it now, though. But anyways, with that, on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Jet V, who says, much admiration for you guys.
And thank you so much for the support, and thank you so much for the admiration as well. I don't really feel like what we do is exceptional, but I do thank everyone so much for appreciating what we do. It's always high praise, and it's always very. I'm finding myself at a lack of words tonight. As usual, and that's the problem. But anyways, I find it very humbling to hear that so many people enjoy what we do, and they find this to be an admiration because I'm just doing what I always do. A lot of people find me a little annoying because this is what I do all the freaking time. But I thank you so much for the support, and I thank you for helping this channel to keep on running so that way I can keep on doing this. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Jack Baxter, who says, I rarely catch you guys live, but keep up the good work. You guys are legends.
And thank you so much for the support. Also, finally, the pilgrimage to the live, it happened, so welcome, and thank you so much for the support, and we will make sure to keep doing what we're doing, because with y'all's support, it is possible. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And also, Matthew, real quick, I want to make this shout out to everyone. Does anyone know that last, I believe it was $375 million in support that was sent to Ukraine that was approved by both houses of Congress? If y'all could let me know what bill that was by its number, I want to pull that one up real quick and look at something because I think it'll further a point that I made a little while ago. I might be wrong on that though. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, Enforcer, did you know that the Pentagon says Russia has not destroyed even one HIMARS system in Ukraine?
I actually did know that because you put it in the live chat earlier.
Yes. And now it's pinned at the top.
Yeah. And I read that a little while ago. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Chip Kerwan, who says, headline, Russia's final offensive. Is that really your prediction? Putin cannot lose and go down easily. He is guaranteed to pull out a lot of dirty tricks.
Great question. It is the last offensive. Of course, the Russians can always try an offensive, but, and you know, of course, this won't be the final one, but this will be the final one that will make any kind of ground. That's what I mean by that. Because when you look at the situation in Bakhmut, the Russians are losing almost 600 soldiers a day. Usually they lost around 200, so we know that almost 400 soldiers a day are being lost in this area, off of today's casualty report. That is an incredibly high number for an offensive. We've never seen them do anything similar. Even in much larger battles, like the battles of Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, they didn't even lose those kinds of soldiers then. And so going off of those numbers, I just can't see any kind of meaningful offensive happening after this one. They've completely expended their manpower and resources just to gain a mile and a half now. And so the idea of them ever doing anything else, because a mile and a half is minuscule, they will probably just try another offensive. It won't even take any ground. They'll just be losing thousands of men a day and may as well not even conduct offensives and just conduct entirely defensive operations. And that's what I'm seeing. Of course, he'll probably try and pull every trick he can out of his pocket, but that doesn't mean that they'll be successful. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And I think, hopefully, doesn't look like anyone's gotten me a number. Could anyone give me the last bill number that was read off and approved in Congress for support going to Ukraine? Because I know there's been about 20 of them total, or at least, or more. And so if y'all can give me the number for that, I'd be appreciative because I want to pull it up and see what the votes looked like. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have another $20 super chat from David Colley, who says, you are exceptional. Madison and his wife were right in my mind. Gave all U.S. the we are not defeated.
1 second, Matthew. It looks like someone got me the number I was looking for. And let's see, it does appear to be the case. Actually, no, that one's still being waiting to be read. But anyways, moving on to this. I thank you so much for the support, David. And also, I thank you for the kind words again. It's incredibly humbling, but I just find myself to be me. You know, I'm just me. And so I would agree with you, though. Madison and his wife were pretty interesting. One thing I found interesting is that Madison gets shot at the Battle of Bladensburg, starts running back to Washington. In fact, they don't even stop. They just go through the town, and then his wife was in the White House, and she's like, oh crap, the British are coming. She's like, we need to leave. And so her and some servants took down a decent amount of the paintings in the White House and carted them off. And that's the reason why, believe it or not, Matthew, we have that incomplete portrait of George Washington, which I'll show you right here. Let me see if I can find the one I'm talking about. This one here. It's this one. That's the reason why we have it, is because they took it out of the White House and carted it off with them.
Oh.
Yeah, so pretty cool. And also, one thing that is kind of a little bit of propaganda in the United States part about the British were quite civil when they went into Washington, D.C. Yes, they did burn down the White House and the Capitol building and also the post office, but they completely left private property unmolested, didn't touch it. They actually were very strict and carried out punishments for soldiers that tried to loot private property. The only time they would take any action against it is if residents or soldiers were firing at them from a personal residence. Then they would go and burn the building down. But beyond that, they were quite tame when going through Washington, which was really interesting to see, especially when you hear the stories that are kind of told sometimes in American history on that subject. Still not one of the best moments because our major, I guess you could say, administrative buildings got burned down, but still pretty interesting all in all historically. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, David. And with that, we are on to the next one. I hope I addressed that one fairly well.
And also, real quick, just to mention it, it looks like a train crossed North Korean border into Russia. So it looks like the Russians are now taking the old equipment from poor old North Korea that doesn't have anything new. So that's a pretty bad look for Russia, I would say.
I would say, and real quick, it looks like, if I find this here, Matthew, have you ever been on Congress.gov?
Yes.
All right, so real quick, where in the world will we go to find the votes on in the House and the Senate on this bill?
Let's see here. You'd probably go up top a little bit. There should be press on the roll call votes.
Let's see, roll call. Oh, there we go. All right.
And there should be a record somewhere in here.
All right, so it looks like. All right, so here we go. This is one of the last bills, and I wanted to cover this real quick because this was brought up at the beginning, and when I was talking about only a semblance of resistance. Let's look at the roll call votes here and tell me what y'all are seeing, because I'm kind of seeing the same thing. We look at the House. The House voted on this on the 10th of May, and this passed the House with 368 votes in favor and 57 against. Now, think about that number, and think about how right now, coming around to midterm cycles, a certain party, and everyone's saying it, is saying that they will not support Ukraine. But if we look at these figures here, obviously, we're beyond 57 of whoever these are, and we don't know the exacts of who's who, because I'm sure that there were probably a small number, probably 2 or 3 of one party that didn't support, and the majority of them were from another. But by and large, the majority of the House, it was almost unanimous, I guess you could say, in terms of modern politics, supported the bill in the House. Moving into the Senate, it was almost unanimous again, with 86 for in favor and 11 against. And that's something that I was trying to say earlier, is that while you'll hear on the by and large talking points that one group doesn't support the thing, oh, it's terrible, we ought to not be supporting it, it's getting people killed, or it's wasting money, yada yada yada. The last time anyone voted on a bill to support Ukraine with arms and equipment, this was all almost unanimous. And that's what I'm trying to say. It's only the semblance of resistance. You could really vote for whoever, and this is a one-track decision. No party is going to go and veer off and do anything crazy. The new party will take charge, and then they will start passing these bills, and you'll still see that these vote records will almost still remain unanimous, like they are right here. That's one thing I've been trying to say, of course, not getting political here, but speaking a little bit of fact based off of historical precedents. And now we can see voting precedents here off of what's really happening inside of, I guess you could say, the government, in terms of how votes are being distributed in yays and nays on Ukrainian support. And the Ukes disagree that those were virtually unanimous. I don't know. I mean, like, real quick, 368 divided by 435 divided by 435. That is 85% of the House of Representatives voting in favor of something. 85%. You will rarely ever find bilateral support for something like that in Congress. Ever. I mean, like, it's almost unheard of. And 86 to 11, that's literally just a direct translation. 86% of the Senate voted in favor of that bill. That's practically unanimous as far as it goes in Congress. Nothing will ever get 100%, but that is about as close as one can get. And that's what I was trying to say a little bit earlier. And so with that, now that I've been able to back that up with some votes on one of the previous bills that supported Ukraine, let's move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Blue Flam 777 once again, who says, "This is an encouragement to you," and the question goes to the chat.
And thank you so much for the support. And of course, I thank you for helping this channel out. Support helps us to keep this thing going, and I thank you so much for that. But like, don't ever think that you're supporting this channel to encourage me to keep running. That's not at all like how I'm viewing this. I view this as this is the thing I wanted to do, and I want to keep doing it. If y'all support me, it helps me to keep doing it. But I'm just driven by my convictions that I had at the start of the war alone to keep this thing going. But I still thank you so much for the support, and I hope that that does address the comment fairly well. And real quick, let's hear out the live chat question.
And the live chat question goes to the Pack Rat, who says, "Is it feasible to give Ukraine all of Russia's frozen assets as part payment for their crimes?"
I guess you could say yes, but at the and there's really nothing the Russians can do unless they wanted to go to war with the West. So I guess you could say that would be the case. Also, real quick, Videshi Baba, I'll have to pull that one up here in a second. Let me copy that and paste that off screen. And can you reread that one more time, Matthew?
He said, let's see, the Pack Rat said, "Is it feasible to give Ukraine all of Russia's frozen assets as part payment for their crimes?"
And I guess you could say yes, there's really nothing the Russians can do, so they could give those assets to Ukraine. The question would be if the West would want to do that. Maybe we would want to seize the assets, take possession of them personally, and then give them to Ukraine. I guess you could say as a way of making sure that the support keeps them Western aligned instead of just giving them a lump sum of cash and then, leaving them to their own devices. That's something that would have to be weighed out by the governments involved, but honestly, in my opinion, I wouldn't see a problem with giving it to them directly. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the question fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And real quick, let me read this one over here. Let's see. So this was for fiscal year 2023. This was introduced on February 25th of 2022, and we can see that this was and I'm trying to read through this real quick. Act provides supplemental appropriations for assistance to Ukraine, establishes a compensation program for, wait a minute, this was introduced on February 25th of 2022. That would have been a day after the war, if I'm correct. And down here it says Public Law number 117-180. This was on September 30th, if I'm reading that correctly, 2022?
Yes.
All right, so let's see. So this appears to be, of course, one thing that's important to remember is that there may be a little bit of, and of course, this is one thing we don't talk about a lot on this channel, a little bit of fudging here, because this is one thing that a lot of people like to do these days in government on both sides, is that they'll make a bill called something, and then it includes everything. And some of the times it's not even related to whatever the bill's titled. So it looks like there is 156 sections in this bill, so I don't think I could read them all off on stream to get a good idea of exactly what it's talking about, because you can see we can see right here that this is talking about the Department of Veteran Affairs, which of course is not about Ukraine, and of course we're not going to get into that because that's a whole other thing. But we can see right here that this bill is called Continuing Appropriations and Ukraine Supplemental Appropriations Act, and then there's stuff about the VA in it, which isn't even within that scope of the title. So I don't know on this one. I'd have to go through and look at a lot of research on it and see what's going on here, because let's go look at the roll call votes. We can see that, wait, hang on, this was in the House, 230 to 201, and then in the House earlier on, it looks like in March, it completely fell flat on its face in the House once, and then it didn't the second time, so it looks like a decent amount of people switched their minds, but still it's pretty close. But then in the Senate, it was almost unanimous in favor. It was 72% in favor. So interesting. I'll have to look at that one again. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a very, very generous donation from Chris Subola, who puts in a $250 donation and
Good
says, I
Lord.
love your vids from Madison, Wisconsin.
Wisconsin, home of Culver's. And thank you so much for the support. And let's take a look at, let me make sure it's correct, Madison, Wisconsin. So Madison, that is, if I'm correct, Matthew, that would be the capital of Wisconsin, wouldn't it be?
I believe so.
Capital
I think.
of Wisconsin. It is. It's Madison, Wisconsin. So I'm glad I remember that that is the capital of. Look at. Oh, that's cool. It's on like an isthmus.
Oh, it's an isthmus.
Yeah, the isthmus.
I've never heard of that term ever.
You haven't? Hang on.
No.
Isthmus. The isthmus, a narrow strip of land with sea on either side, forming a link between two larger areas of land.
Interesting.
And you can see right here the Madison Isthmus. And I got it right. Is that cool or what? That's really neat. Like
that is pretty cool, actually.
So let's take. Here's their state capital. What does it look like? Does it look good? Does it look bad?
I like the road
crap,
layout.
That's solid. I like that. That's a good state capital right there. Also, I like the sidewalk.
That is pretty cool. Also
got a nice little church steeple over here. Got some pretty modern buildings. We got the Wisconsin Veterans Museum. What? Oh, hang on. It looks like we're going to be around like the Capitol Square. What's in the Veterans Museum? Oh my God, that is a good museum.
Wow.
Look at that.
There's the old goat. Do you see the old goat?
Where? Old goat.
The plane. Old goat.
Get on out there, you old goat. But let's go down here. Oh my God, is that a Sopwith pup or a camel? Can't tell for certain. But oh my God, it's World War I. They got a whole exhibit for World War I. I'm in love with this place. I like it. It looks like they also got one for the Pacific in World War II. Oh man, wow, this is this museum makes the Department of Archives and History in Alabama just be put to shame. This is on a whole other level. Like, dang.
That is pretty good.
And let's see.
Oh wow, nice ship. I like that.
The USS Wisconsin, which was an Iowa class battleship. They got a cannon. Have been near a cannon like that. Really cool. Korea, probably. Well, no. That's not Korea because those are Panthers. Probably the Battle of the Bulge, which we were just talking about on stream. Oh man, I've had an M1 Garand. Those things are fun. I like them. But oh my gosh, this is the coolest museum ever. I like this one. This makes me want to go to Wisconsin right now. Look at that. Oh, man, this is cool. I like it. This is a cool museum. I thank you so much for the support. I thank you so much for the support. This is so cool. This is a really cool little treat right here to take a look at. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, Chris. That is your first time, I believe, ever supporting this channel. And that is a massive amount of support. And, of course, helps this channel to keep running and helps us to keep alive behind the scenes and to keep the lights on. And also, it's really cool to see that your state capital is on an isthmus. That is like the coolest thing ever. It's a very weird geographical feature, but I like it. That's really neat. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope you enjoyed us taking a little look at your hometown of Madison, Wisconsin. And with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you so much once again.
And up next, we have another donation from Rasmus Westholm, who puts in a $100 super chat and says, pretty much never catch you live since I live in Europe. So see this as longtime support catch-up from the replay since day 40, although silent. Great coverage.
And thank you so much for the support, Rasmus. And also, it's totally fine to all of my viewers who are watching this and didn't catch it live. It's totally fine. I don't hold it against anyone if you catch it live or not live. I just love to know that people do enjoy the news and the coverage we give. And that's more than enough to me to be happy. And so I thank you so much once again for the support. And you've been watching from the replay since day 40. So you've been here for 116 days, 216 days now, which is quite a long time. And I thank you so much for finding us to be your source of news on this war since day 40. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the kind words and the support as well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again.
And up next, we have a $7 super chat from Putin while hanging in the middle of the Kremlin, who says, since I've got nothing intelligent to ask, one from super chat.
And thank you so much for the support, Putin will hang in the middle of the Kremlin, and we will make sure to answer a live chat in your honor. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
And the question goes to Mozadak48, who says, did you see the news today where Poland held a referendum to annex all the Russian embassies in Poland? They had a 129% turnout.
129%?
How does that work?
Oh, it's one. I believe that may be one of those like sham referendum things, you know, like where they're trying to show the absurdity of it.
Oh, okay.
I think that might be the case. If so, I mean, I wouldn't find a problem with that, taking back the land, but still, 129% turnout, that means that the Czechs, the Slovakians, the Germans, and the Lithuanians all flew into Poland for a little vote there, and so
and that means dead people were voting too.
Oh, well, you know, anyway, let's drop down to this town real quick, just as a quick little look at Poland. What does this look like? This town, I don't know, when you just because we were looking at this building, had a dark look starting off. It was like, oh, it's kind of grim. It doesn't look like Warsaw, which is a cool place. I like Warsaw. And also, I like this town up here that we looked at before. Bielostok? I don't know how to pronounce it, sadly. No, wait. We looked at Elk. Up here. Yeah, we looked at Elk. That's the wrong one. We looked at this one. It was a cool town. I liked it. But anyways, with that, I thank you so much for the support and also letting us know about that interesting quirk and feature. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again. I hope you all enjoyed my Doug DeMuro Easter egg.
And up next, we have a $7 super chat from Richard Goulet, who says, next time, the Russian train cars will be marked with not military.
And thank you for the support. And I think they probably will. The Russians are very sneaky. Very, very sneaky. And I'm sure that they will try and pull that off sometime around. I'm sure they'll paint a giant target on the side too, just to make sure it's very discreet. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
All right. And up next, we have a $7 super chat from Putin while hanging in the middle of the Kremlin, once again, who said, let's see here. Just reading over it real quick. He said, all I said was that those toothless soldiers that surrendered look like Serbian volunteers. By the way, does anyone know how many NATO forces are at the ready in Europe?
Sadly, we don't have an official figure right now, but it is well over 10,000 or more. We're not exactly sure, though, so take that with a grain of salt. We can put it in the ballpark of over 10,000, but we don't know how far over 10,000 it goes. But with that, I thank you for the support, and I find it interesting that you picked out the Serbs. Of course, the Serbs do support Russia in a way, but in others don't. It's kind of odd, but still with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope we addressed that comment fairly well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from the Technical Fool, who says, here, have a beer, a ginger one.
And thank you so much for the support. We will have a ginger beer. I'm really more of a big fan of root beer. It's my favorite form. But thank you so much once again. And I will try the ginger beer, as long as it's not alcoholic. And so with that, we are on to the next. And thank you once again for the support.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Danny Van Stralen, who says, greetings from Genk, Belgium. Are you going to do a fundraiser for the animals who are a victim of the war in Ukraine? And keep up the good work, SU.
And I thank you so much for the support. And also, real quick, before we take a look at the town of Genk, I would like to say that we have run a fundraiser before for the pets of Ukraine through International Humane Society, and it did not do well. It only brought in around $8,000. And I know that that sounds like, oh, well, we should support the animals. But one thing that's important to me is that that this channel gets as much support as to Ukraine as possible. It doesn't really matter what kind of support. It could be medical support. It could be support to the soldiers. I just want to make sure that we're helping out as much as we can. And it seems like, and of course, I have a very huge soft spot for dogs, and that's why we did that one the first time. It just seemed like not a lot of people got behind the idea of helping out the animals, sadly, and I was kind of like, oh man, that sucks, because I was like hoping it would be a good one, but it didn't turn out to be. And so I would do another one, but I would hope that a lot of people got really behind it, because I always want to know that our fundraisers are doing as much as we can to support as much as possible. And it just seemed like last time it may have been an unpopular fundraiser to do, but we will see about doing it again, because I still like the idea of helping out the dogs and the cats and all of the pets of Ukraine. But real quick, moving on from that, let's take a look at the town of Genk. And so let's drop down here and stop before stop. That's just, I don't, it's a very interesting language. Also, it looks like you're Flemish. which is really oh wow, look at that building. Lego building.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. I like that.
I've never heard of gank.
I've never heard of either. But I gotta say, it's a kind of like a modern town. Like all the buildings in it are like of a modern architectural style.
It's like modern but old at the same time.
Yeah, you know, it's kind of like brutalist architecture of like the 70s or the 80s. Let's drop down here. See what this looks like. Oh wow, this is neat. This kind of reminds me.
Dang, that is a huge satellite dish on the side of that house. Look at that.
They're searching for
that
alien
is like
life.
radar.
That's the Arecibo telescope's replacement. It's in Genk in Belgium, but still, I like this part of town. This is nice. I also like how the roofs kind of bow outwards as they go further down. I think that's neat. But still, thank you so much for the support. And hey, by the way, since you are from Belgium, tell me this. Is it true that there's this huge thing in between Flanders and Wallonia? Is that just a thing that everyone talks about internationally, or is that seriously a divisive issue in Belgium, is whether you're from Flanders or Wallonia? I'm really interested in that. I've never gotten a straight answer, and I've never been able to ask a Belgian before, but please let me know, because I've always been interested about that story. But with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope you enjoyed us taking a look at your town of Genk in Belgium. And of course, I'm just kidding when I say it like that. I think it's Genk. Also, y'all got a big town, Hasselt, here that's like in a, it's got circular roads around it. Let's, real quick, I gotta check this out. Oh crap! Now this is cool. This kind of reminds me of York, doesn't it, Matthew?
A little bit.
You know, like the little city square, like the shambles and all that?
Yeah, it reminds me of Germany, actually. It reminds me of that part of Walt Disney World where it's like the German, like, Epcot area.
That's really going to get a lot of people in the live chat real happy, isn't it, Matthew? But with that,
why?
Well, I mean, you know, relating something to Disney World, you know, I was like, but
it's supposed to be realistic.
Yeah, well, real quick, we'll go there real quick, so that just in case of some.
Oh, they have it on Google Maps.
Yeah, they got it on Google Maps. Of course they do.
But like a street view.
Yeah, they got it on Street View. Of course they do. But let me find it.
But you don't know where it is, though.
Here we go. Yeah, here's the World Showcase. So, let's see.
That's toward the back.
Yeah, it's toward the back. German Pavilion. Here we go. So that's what Matthew's talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not really seeing it, but, you know, you might want, real quick, man, I'm going to allow you the 5-second rule. You can backtrack on that statement if you want.
I would like to retract my statement, and I sincerely apologize, and I hope that I can be forgiven.
So hopefully your sins can't be forgiven, because I was like, what? That's like saying Britain looks like the British Pavilion. I mean, like, it's fairly accurate, right? It's fairly accurate, right? I mean, this is...
Oh, that's accurate. Look at that old tree. This is supposed to be British? Are you for real?
Yeah, this is supposed to be British.
Now, this isn't anything... I don't remember Walt Disney World looking depressing like that.
Honestly, this just looks sad. I mean, like, when we went through the first time, it seemed neat. But this looks depressing. Like, this is not
Ex-Mojo said Disney lawyers firing up the jet.
Yeah, they're firing up the jet. They're coming our way. Britain does not look like this at all. This is really a bad misrepresentation of what Britain looks like, because off of this, you would assume it's just depression and sadness, but really it's depression, sadness, and a slight drizzle of rain. But with that, we are on to the next one. No, I'm just kidding. Britain's a really nice place. I love Britain. But with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support. And I'm sorry that Matthew slandered the beautiful country of Belgium by saying it looks like the German Pavilion at Disney World. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a $20 super chat from, let me see if I can get this right, Goncalo Dionisio, I think. Hopefully I'm not butchering the hell out of it. But thank you very much for that support. He says from Olcabaca, Portugal, lurking since day 7, and when I can, take a question from the chat and keep up the awesome work.
Oh, from like from Middle Portugal. I guess that'll be the best way for me to pronounce. We'll say it. Wow, you got a monastery. That's cool. Let's take a look at it. Why are all the Google Images things like tilted these days?
Yeah, it's like a music video or something when you turn it sideways. You know how they record music videos?
Yeah, yeah. But wow, look at this. I love the entrance to this. It's kind of Kind of reminds me of a normal cathedral, but much smaller in size. Of course, the actual towers are very short, but the entrance looks similar. But wow, I got a whole monastery there and everything. That is cool. You don't have a lot of monasteries in America, so of course that might be normal, but for us it isn't. Now this, to me, Matthew, kind of looks like, if I had to compare it to anywhere, it looks like northern Italy.
Yeah, somewhat.
Somewhat. This building could use a little bit of touching up, though. But, I mean, like, the rest of it... Well, it's, model care.
Interesting.
Interesting. But anyways,
Why does it say 50 cents?
50 cents.
There's like a rate? I don't know about this place.
50...
That poster is looking a little strange.
You know, man, when I saw that sign, I thought of that little German bus ad, you know, where the thing was like, and then it dropped it and just started screaming. That's what I started thinking about when I saw the 50 cent thing. But still, I thank you so much for the support and also helping us to take a good look at the town of Alkobaka. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. I love the monastery. The monastery is really cool. It's even got its own little gardens and everything. That's neat. You don't have monasteries in the U.S. hardly ever. So it's really cool to take a look at one. And also, Britain and Portugal, I believe, have one of the oldest standing alliances in the world, dating back to the 1600s, I believe. And someone said 50. Oh, it's 50 euros. I thought the decimal minute was like it was like 50 cents worth of a euro.
I think it is like 50 cents in euros.
And interesting. But anyways, with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope you enjoyed taking a look at the town of Alkobaka. I butchered that again, but thank you so much once again, and thank you for being a longtime veteran of the Lee Spring Army. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from David Colley once more, who says, last one, bait to the center. Been used before. Let the center advance past supply to collapse, then strike the sides. Ukraine is using the old NATO 70s tactic. Russia has no counter, designed to stop mass mech attack.
And thank you for the support, and that may be true in the area of Bakhmut. But then again, we never want to go into what the Ukrainian plans may be, because we may guesstimate them accurately. Someone may get a little bit of a hint out there, and then the Ukrainians could end up having a very tough time. But that could be the chance. It could be the possibility that that's what they're trying to pull off there. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, David Colley. That is a pretty good point. Don't want to touch on it too much, just in case if we are getting that correct. But thank you so much once again, and thank you so much for helping this channel to keep on running. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support and being a longtime Old Guard member of the Lee Spring Army.
Yes, indeed. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Montern, who says, from Pembroke, Wales, take a question from the chat. And also, Montern, you're from the same place where the Corgis are from. That's where their hometown is in Pembroke.
The Pembroke Welsh Corgis. Much better than the Cardigan Corgis, which are just ugly. I'm just kidding. All Corgis are beautiful, but I love Pembroke Welsh Corgis a lot more. We have 2 of them, and I love them. So let's go to... He didn't give a specific place in Pembrokeshire. Wait a minute. He said, I think there is a place just called Pembroke. Let me make sure I'm correct on that, though.
Oh, it's Pembroke, UK, and Pembrokeshire.
Yes. So there's it's kind of like Oklahoma and Oklahoma City in a way. You know how one's just named after the other. So let's drop down in Pembroke here, and let's see what it looks like. So this is like typical Wales. Like, this is what it just looks like everywhere. But still, it's neat. And also, it's very colorful. All the buildings are like a different color. What's this here? Oh, it's a realty building. I bet you that house costs 1.5 million pounds. We've gone over there, and, you know, just because you're curious, you're like, oh, how much does it cost for a house here? There's like insane, you know, like a house in America that would be $250,000 or $300,000 in Britain would be like 700,000 pounds, which would be worth like $800,000. It was really nuts to see, but pretty cool.
And Montern said, check out the castle.
The castle, Pembroke Castle. Pembroke Castle. Let's take a look. Oh, pretty cool. It's a post.
That's like the like type castle you see like in storybooks, so like with the like river around it.
Thomas the Tank Engine is what you mean, right?
No.
Well, that's what I was thinking. But anyways, it's got those post-Crusade towers, the round ones instead of the square ones, which are much more effective at countering siege weaponry. But wow, oh, it's got a nice view. I like the view. How much does this cost? That would be a good. Also, they got a cave. That's cool. That's really cool.
That is cool.
I like this castle. It's a child. That woman is holding that child in a very bad way. That kid's going to grow up with some neck problems right there. It's just supporting the whole weight of its body with its neck. But, wow, this is neat. I haven't seen a British castle rebuilt to show, like, I guess you could say scenes of daily life. Also, oh, look, the English Civil War. Great, look, it's a parliamentarian killing, wait a minute. Hang on.
I think the guy getting hit might be overreacting a little bit.
Yeah, honestly, you ought to shrug that off. But wait a minute, hang on. I'm trying to get this right here. I think this is actually a royalist, wouldn't it be? Because these guys are wearing red. In the new model army, it was the one who implemented red because it was the cheapest dye color, and I believe the royalists wore like these bluish colors. But I never remember them wearing orange. I never remember reading that. I might be wrong though. Correct me if I am.
And also Montern added and said the castle was besieged by Oliver Cromwell. Oliver Cromwell, excuse me. Yeah, Oliver.
And thank you for the support. And also, once again, to recap on that, that's one thing that I like a lot about English history is the English Civil War. It's a very interesting point in the nation's history. It really started to bring Britain, although you wouldn't think it would be the case, it started bringing them in more into the modern foreground, I guess you could say, and really started to prep them for going into the world the way they did. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. Everyone's saying that it's a cavalier with a sword, and I think it was. Everyone's saying a roundhead. So yes, I think it was, because I was like, no, red was never a British color until the new model army. So those had to have been parliamentarians that were getting killed. And so with that, we are on to the next one. But thank you so much once again for the support, Montern, and also letting us take a look at Pembroke in Wales.
All right, and also, we actually have 16 super chats left somehow. I think, let's see here. Yeah, we have 16 left. So up next, we have a $10 donation from David Colley, who says, show my hometown, please. Love you too, and keep it up. Let's see here. Tehachapi, California.
Tehachapi. Let's take a look. It's in the desert. We're going to have to make this a little quick. I hope you understand. But let's drop down here. Speed run. Oh, pretty nice town, actually. Pretty nice. Oh, I like it. I like it from this one intersection. It's got a nice crosswalk and everything. So with that, I hope you enjoyed us taking a look at the town of Tehachapi in California. And thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Salmons, who says, hi from Ottawa. Would you please do a fundraiser for an animal rescue group in Ukraine? There are so many videos of Ukrainian soldiers rescuing animals.
And thank you so much for the support. That is the second time we've had someone ask tonight if we could do one for the animals. And I think we will try one again. Whether it does well or not will be another question. But I would love to do one again. And it seems like a lot of y'all would like to do one as well. And so I will see about having that as tomorrow's fundraiser. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support and the suggestion.
And also, folks, I see some folks asking, where's the Ukraine news? This is actually the question segment, so we're moving on to multiple different topics. The question segment can go anywhere, so that's why it's interesting. But up next, we have a $5 donation from Justin Moore, who says, happy to hear you're feeling better. What are y'all's thoughts on the reports of Russian soldiers are now dressing in civilian clothing in Kherson?
I thank you for the support, first off, and to answer that, I wouldn't know. I have not gotten any video or picture evidence confirming that, sadly, but I wouldn't doubt it, because we have seen Russians doing that before. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question fairly well, and thank you once again for the support, and also thank you so much for thinking about our well-being. Of course, I was exhausted yesterday, feeling a lot better now, and hopefully I won't have to take another break anytime soon. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again.
And up next, a big shout out to Buddy Smith and William Jones for putting in a $5 donation each, and thank you both for the support, and we do appreciate it very much. Up next, we have a $5 super chat from Philip Fixes, who says, Menelo Museum Sculpture Garden. There's tenacity and there's stupidity. Listen to your body. It'll keep you stronger for longer. Health comes first.
Menelo, how do you spell that?
Mennello.
Menelo Museum. Let's go to the Menelo Museum. Menelo Museum. I don't see a garden.
Sculpture Garden. That's the second one.
Yeah, here we go. Sculpture Garden. Alright, so let's take a look at this. I've got to be honest with you folks. I don't really get modern art. Like, I just don't get it. I don't really see... Well, okay, I get this one. But beyond that, I just don't get it at all. Like, it's not pretty to me most of the time. It's like, you know, like, I don't know. It's just not really my thing. But still pretty interesting to look at. Like, this just looks like crumpled paper. But with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support and allowing us to take a look at the Menelo Museum Sculpture Garden in the middle of Orlando, Florida. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Fethdar, who says, any chance we can get a Monday stream and maybe you can take a day or even two off on the weekend instead? Mondays suck and your presence would make it. And that's where it ended.
It sounds like they reached the type font limit, but still, I don't know, because one thing that I know that a lot of people can enjoy is weekends. You know, because everyone's off on the weekends, everyone gets to watch The Enforcer, and that's one thing that I like. Also, Mondays usually were our lowest days viewership-wise. A lot of people didn't watch on Mondays, and that's why we decided that that would be the day we took off weekly, is because if it was impacting, we wanted to impact the least amount of schedules possible, and it seemed that Monday was historically the weekly low in terms of viewership. So we're like, you know, if we could get rid of a day, it would be Mondays, because we're not going to be messing up that many people as compared to like a weekend or a normal weekday. So it is an interesting idea. I would consider it, but still, I always want to make sure that we're not disrupting too many people's schedules. But with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $5 super chat from Badger Resistance, who says, what general, colonel, lieutenant, or war hero would you bring back from World War I or World War II to help Ukraine at this point of war?
I would bring back our boy Alvin York. I'm kind of biased with that, but he was a pretty upright guy, had some very good, strong moral convictions, so you could count on him to not commit any kind of war crimes or anything. He was rather tame because he didn't really want to commit any acts of violence, but when he did, they were swift and they were efficient. So I would have to say Alvin York would be my guy to bring back. Or, you know, if you had ambitions beyond Ukraine, you could always bring back David Lloyd George, so that way you could sit there after the war when Russia's defeated and go, yes, I'd like Bryansk, yes, Kursk as well, yes. In case, if y'all know what I'm talking about, you know, because David Lloyd George was quite a guy. But with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Badger Resistance once again, who says, do you think Operation Unthinkable should have been implemented in July 1st of 1945 to save lives in the future?
Real quick, I'm going to have to refresh my memory, because I've heard of the Operation Unthinkable, but I cannot recall what it's exactly about. Operation Unthinkable. Let's see. British Chiefs of Staff against the Soviet Union. Oh, man, yes, we should have. Of course, not being a warmonger or anything, but that would have saved us a lot of time and trouble in the future, and that would have drastically changed history. But the truth is that even if it was my will and my wish to have that done, it couldn't have been done. All of the Western countries and also the Soviet Union was on the brink of economic collapse, and there was no money inside the treasuries anymore, and really no way to continue to take on debt, because the interests were becoming so high that it would be impossible to pay off the creditors at that point. And so if the war had ended with Germany and then continued on anew without pause on the Soviets, it would have been a losing war financially because it wouldn't have been able to be backed. But with that, I hope that does address the question fairly well. And thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $3 super chat from Mark Andre Burnett. We also have a $2 donation from Dupper Bob, Philip Seaver, and Dubsy Dabster, as well as a $1 donation from Devin Betterton. So thank you very much to, excuse me, thank you very much to all of you for your support while I choke there. But anyways, Enforcer, would you like to add a few words?
And yes, I would love to thank all of y'all so much for y'all's support. Of course, it means a lot to us that all of y'all helped this channel to keep on running. Whether the support be big or small, it means a lot to me that out of everything y'all could have done, y'all have decided to help support this channel and help us to keep running. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Blue Flam 777, who says, once a month, take a 3-day off along with Mondays, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and question goes to the chat.
And thank you so much for the support, Blue Flam 777. While I did take a break yesterday, I don't want to make it where it's like a regular scheduled thing. And also, if it was once a month, that would be really hard for people to get track of, you know, because it's very hard to keep people apprised of when we're doing things. Like, a lot of people don't know why a stream didn't run yesterday, even now. And so it's really hard to communicate those kinds of things. So it would be an interesting idea, but still, I think we'll keep on with the 6-day a week, every month kind of schedule we have right now, although it is a little grueling at times. But with that, thank you so much once again, and let's get a live chat in your honor, and I think that gets us into the live chat segment as well.
And we actually have a few more super chats, but the live chat question goes to Book Bandit, who says, have you seen the news regarding Belarus stating that Poland is building up a massive fighting force on its border looking to invade?
I have seen that about a month ago, and it was all just hype talk. There has been Western forces on the Belarusian border pretty much ever since the beginning of the war. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from BL Parak, who says, last night's stream was the best. Too bad so many missed it.
Oh no, now he's going to start seeding thoughts of doubt and people like, did I miss it? There was no stream last night, everyone. But thank you so much once again for the support, BL Parak. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Putin will hang in the middle of the Kremlin, once again, who says, I know how to collect more funds for animals. Name the fundraiser, Topples, Beautiful Blondes, Leashes, and Puppies.
Interesting. We may think about that. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment, and we are on to the next one.
And then we have another one from Putin will hang in the middle of the Kremlin, who puts in a $3 donation this time, and says, if there are trained mosquitoes being used by Ukrainians, I see nothing wrong with trained military foxes on the other side.
I thank you for the support, and I gotta say, I mean, like, the foxes gotta be the foxes gotta do what they gotta do, and so if they take a gun here or there, like, that's just what they do. And so with that, thank you so much for the support. And also, let's see, Raga NYC said, this is crazy schedule. He deserves a day here and there to recoup. Oh yeah, but you're on the suffering train with me. You get to watch me sit here and just wear myself out weekly, and you get to sit by and like it. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, in the final super chat, we have a $2 donation from Aquatico50, who says, what do you think is Transnistria's fate after war?
Most likely, if the Russians are not around or they're a little too busy to tend with it, we may see the Moldovans bring that back into the fold and become Moldovan land instead of quasi-Moldovan, half-Transnistrian land. And so with that, I hope that does address that comment fairly well. And I was told that's the last super chat, if you're correct.
Yes.
All right, and so with that, we are going to be cutting the live chat question a little bit short because we are massively over time tonight. So we're going to answer 3 questions from the live chat and then round out tonight's stream.
All right, and first up, we have the entire gang of decoders tonight. Draconia, CFA, Mark Hodges, WFTU, and BME, the most decoders in one night who figured it out. They said the code says the Russians are conducting their final Hail Mary push for the war.
Y'all did get it correct, and they are. And we covered that earlier in the stream, and due to time restraints, I can't really talk about much, but thank you all to the Morse code deciphers for getting that message correct. All of y'all, with a massive amount. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Wendy, who says, do they change the DEF CON level during training, kind of going through procedural motions? Just curious, while the topic was brought up, anyone know for sure?
I think they may change the DEFCON for the units in training, but on the national level and the international level, I don't think they changed the DEFCON there. So with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well. Of course, take it with a grain of salt because I'm not exactly sure. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Ken Brown, who says, Enforcer, have you heard anything about the nuclear power plant in Chernobyl? Could the Ukrainian workers at the power plant blow it up?
Well, if they raise the power, they could blow it up.
And press AZ5.
Yeah, if they press AZ5, it could blow up. Well, they could at the Zaporizhia power plant. That's possible. At Chernobyl, not so much because it's not exactly active anymore. I believe they deactivated the last reactor in 2006. So
did they?
Yes, they did. They still maintain.
I thought they still had one on. I think that's why they were like so desperate to get it back, weren't they?
No, they were just let's see. Chernobyl maintains a large workforce, although the reactors have all ceased generation. The large workforce is just for the decommissioning process because it's quite labor intensive to do the decommissioning process. It takes a lot of manpower, a lot of effort, and a lot of time. So hypothetically, they could blow up the one down in Zaporizhia. The question would be, why would they want to? And so that I hope that does address that question fairly well as the last one of the night. But real quick, we have David Colley with a $10 super chat saying KK6KLT. Thanks, guys. And I don't know what that means, but I do thank you for
Is he a ham radio operator?
I'm not exactly certain. But I do thank you so much for the support, David. And, of course, thank you so much for helping this channel to keep on running and helping to support us a whole load tonight and helping us to keep on running. And so with that, we have reached the end of the stream. It's been quite a marathon, 3 hours and 45 minutes long. But it's been quite enjoyable to cover the news with all of y'all again, and of course, good to be back. I thank you all so much once again for watching. If y'all did enjoy this channel and you did enjoy the news, please make sure to subscribe as these streams run every single day of the week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, except for Mondays. Thank you all so much once again for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the war in Ukraine and also run the Sunday fundraiser. Good night, everyone. Stay safe, take care, and Slava Ukraini!
Yes.
The Lviv Spring Army sends its regards.
Ще не вмерла України, ні слава, ні воля. Ще нам, браття українці, усміхнеться доля. Згинуть наші вороженьки, як роса на сонці, запануємо ми, браття, у своїй сторонці. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького роду. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького